Dominic Russo feathered the brake with an almost imperceptible touch, the black sedan responding with barely a nod. The painted white stripes of the crosswalk seemed to blaze under the sodium glow of the streetlights, and for a fleeting, dreamlike second, the tableau beyond his windshield appeared disarmingly normal. The weary grind of late afternoon traffic, a restless cold breeze playfully batting discarded scraps of paper along the littered curb. A young couple, their faces tight with simmering resentment, arguing in hushed tones on the corner, their words swallowed by the city's hum. Then she materialized, a figure stepping off the sidewalk with a hesitant grace. Evelyn Carter. Not a phantom conjured by memory, not a cruel trick of the light. It was undeniably her. Her hair, perhaps a shade longer, the ends kissed with a deeper, almost brooding darkness, pulled back severely into a low ponytail, a style that whispered of practicality, of a woman who had somewhere important to be and no time for frivolous pretense. A timeless camel coat, its wool soft and worn, embraced her shoulders against the chill. The wind had painted her cheeks with a delicate rose blush, and her hand, her left hand, rested gently, protectively, on her abdomen. A gesture so tender, so undeniably maternal, that it stole the air from Dominic's lungs, leaving him gasping. Pregnant. The realization slammed into him, a physical blow. His body reacted viscerally, instinctively, long before his mind could marshal its defenses or construct a rational argument. His pulse hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, his palms slick with a sudden, icy sweat as they clenched the leather of the steering wheel. The world constricted, the periphery blurring, until only the crosswalk remained in sharp focus, and the woman who occupied it, the woman he had once, with youthful arrogance and unwavering conviction, sworn he would never, could never lose. Evelyn looked up. Their eyes collided through the pane of glass, the impact as jarring and unexpected as a sucker punch he never saw coming. Her steps faltered not at all, maintaining their steady rhythm, but something deep within her face underwent a seismic shift. A fleeting flicker of shock, quickly masked, replaced by a composure so unnaturally serene it seemed almost theatrical, too practiced, too meticulously controlled to be genuine. It was the face of someone who had steeled themselves for pain, who had rehearsed indifference in the mirror, and was now determined, come hell or high water, not to let it show. Dominic remained frozen, immobile. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. In that moment, stripped bare of his carefully constructed persona. He wasn't the ruthless, feared man everyone kowtowed to. He wasn't the powerful boss, the titan of industry with the entire city seemingly dancing at his fingertips. He was simply a husband, an ex-husband, still reeling from the sting of divorce papers signed months ago, now helplessly watching the woman he had loved more than life itself carry a child that his instincts recognized with a primal certainty that felt like a searing brand on his soul. His Evelyn, his no longer, continued her measured progress across the crosswalk. The soft, rhythmic click of her boots against the cold pavement echoed in the sudden, deafening silence that had descended upon him. 1 step, 2, 3. Dominic's throat constricted, choked with unspoken words, with 1,000 desperate questions clamoring for release. Why didn't you tell me? How far along are you? Are you all alone in this? Is it mine? But the last one wasn't truly a question. It was a bone-deep knowing, a certainty that resonated through every fiber of his being with such undeniable force that it felt irrevocably, excruciatingly physical. Evelyn reached the far curb. She didn't hesitate, didn't falter. She didn't cast a single glance back, not even a furtive peek. She simply melted into the throng of pedestrians on the sidewalk, disappearing into the anonymity of the city with the deliberate precision of a seasoned escape artist, as if she could vanish through sheer force of will, erasing herself from his sight, from his life, forever. Dominic's foot hovered indecisively above the accelerator, paralyzed by conflicting impulses. His entire body screamed, a primal roar of instinct. Go after her! Don't let her disappear again! But his pride, battered but not broken, hissed a sharp warning. Don't you dare debase yourself. Let her go. His heart, however, spoke in a quieter, more insidious voice, a voice laced with a chilling certainty. If you let her walk away again, Dominic, you will regret it, every single agonizing day, for the rest of your miserable life. The traffic light cycled through its colors, a silent, mocking countdown. Drivers behind him, their patience exhausted, tapped impatiently on their horns. A cacophony of urban irritation that faded into insignificance. Dominic didn't register it. He pulled over at the first available opening, parking the sleek sedan with the reckless abandon of a man who had suddenly forgotten how to perform even the simplest of tasks with any semblance of composure, and threw open the door, lunging out onto the street. The frigid air slapped against his face, a physical jolt, but he remained oblivious. He scanned the sidewalk, his gaze desperate, searching. Evelyn was already farther away than he had anticipated, moving with a determined purpose, her hand still cradling her belly with that same fiercely protective gesture, guarding her secret as if it were a fragile, precious thing that must be shielded from the world. Evelyn. His voice emerged hoarse, rough, barely a whisper. She didn't turn, didn't acknowledge him. Dominic started walking, his long strides eating up the distance, cutting a swathe through the flow of pedestrians with the kind of unyielding presence that compelled people to move aside without fully understanding why. He wasn't pushing, wasn't threatening. There was no overt aggression in his demeanor. He simply existed, a force of nature, and the sidewalk inexplicably, instinctively yielded before him. He was almost close enough to reach out and touch the soft wool of her coat when she finally stopped. Not because she had heard him call her name, but because someone, some oblivious soul lost in the digital world of their smartphone, bumped into her from behind, his attention glued to the screen. Evelyn stumbled, her balance momentarily compromised. But she recovered quickly, her reflexes honed by years of navigating the crowded city streets. Dominic's hand shot out on pure instinct, hovering protectively near her waist without actually making contact, as if his body, independent of his conscious will, refused to risk jarring her, even slightly. The oblivious guy mumbled a cursory, "Sorry," his eyes never leaving his phone, and shuffled on, disappearing back into the anonymous sea of humanity. Evelyn steadied her breath, composing herself. Then she turned slowly, deliberately, as if choosing her posture with painstaking care, each movement measured, controlled. Her eyes met Dominic's again, this time without the distorting filter of glass. Closer now, the connection direct, unfiltered. He braced himself, expecting anger, anticipating tears. What he saw instead was a cool, polite expression, the carefully constructed facade of a stranger who had been greeted with unwanted familiarity, who had been interrupted at the wrong time. "Dominic," she said, just his name, nothing else. The way she uttered it, devoid of warmth, devoid of any trace of affection, cut far deeper than any shouted recrimination, any tearful outburst. It told him, in its quiet, devastating simplicity, that she had painstakingly practiced being okay without him, that she had rehearsed this moment, this encounter, countless times in the solitude of her own mind, and had decided, resolutely, to remain unmoved. Dominic's gaze dropped, drawn against his will to the gentle swell of her belly. He loathed himself for it, for the blatant intrusion, but he couldn't help it. Evelyn's hand shifted subtly, almost imperceptibly, a defensive maneuver as if to shield him from staring too long, to protect her privacy, to guard the burgeoning life within. Don't what?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. Evelyn's jaw tightened, the only outward sign of the turmoil raging beneath the surface. "Don't do this in the street." "I didn't plan this," he said, the words tumbling out with a desperate urgency. He stopped abruptly, realizing the utter absurdity of what he was about to say. "I didn't plan to see you pregnant with my kid on a random Tuesday" sounded utterly insane, even in the privacy of his own head. Evelyn glanced around, her eyes darting nervously. People were passing by, seemingly indifferent, not paying any attention to their quiet drama. But Dominic knew how fleeting anonymity could be, how quickly a fleeting glance could morph into whispered speculation, how easily casual observation could transform into embellished stories that spread like wildfire through the city's intricate network of gossip. Move, she said, her voice firm, unwavering. Walk with me. It wasn't an invitation, not a plea for companionship. It was a command, thinly veiled in a deceptively calm tone. Dominic fell in beside her, instinctively matching her pace without crowding her, without infringing upon her personal space. The old, ingrained instinct to shield her from the chaotic crush of the sidewalk reasserted itself instantly, a reflex honed by years of habit. He didn't touch her, didn't dare to, but he subtly positioned himself to her left, between her and the relentless flow of traffic, just as he had done 100 times, 1,000 times, when they were married, a silent, unspoken gesture of protection. Evelyn noticed. Of course, she did. Her mouth twitched almost imperceptibly, as if she was annoyed at herself for registering the familiar gesture, for allowing a flicker of warmth to penetrate her carefully constructed defenses. They walked in silence for a few steps, the only sound the rhythmic cadence of their footsteps on the pavement. Dominic's mind was a tempest, a maelstrom of conflicting emotions and unanswered questions. But he forced himself to focus, to compartmentalize, to address one thing at a time. "How far along?" he asked, the words measured, controlled. Evelyn didn't answer immediately. Her gaze remained fixed straight ahead, focused on some distant, unseen point. Far enough. Dominic exhaled sharply, a sound that bordered on a frustrated sigh. He wanted to laugh, a bitter, incredulous laugh at the sheer ridiculousness of that evasive answer, but his chest felt too tight, his lungs constricted by a suffocating wave of anxiety. "Evelyn, you don't get to say my name like we're anything," she replied, her voice laced with a brittle edge. "That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you mean. It always is." He bit back the urge to argue, to defend himself, to dissect her words. Months ago, the last time they had spoken with any semblance of civility, arguing had quickly devolved into something sharp, ugly, and irrevocably damaging. Harsh words, accusations, resentments bubbling to the surface like toxic waste. Papers, signatures, a clean ending in theory that had never truly felt clean in practice. Dominic swallowed, forcing down the rising tide of bitterness. "Is it mine?" Evelyn stopped so suddenly, so abruptly, that Dominic almost stumbled into her, his forward momentum unchecked. She turned her face up to his, and for the first time since their encounter, he saw a hairline fracture in her carefully constructed composure, a fleeting chink in her armor, just a subtle tremor in her eyes that betrayed the raw emotion churning beneath the surface, that told him his question had landed like a physical punch, a blow she hadn't anticipated. Then she did something he didn't expect. She smiled, but it wasn't a warm, inviting smile, not a friendly expression of reassurance. It was a small, tight, almost sardonic smile that seemed to say, "Of course you'd ask that. Figures. Do you really think I'd let some random guy touch me?" she asked quietly, her voice laced with a subtle undercurrent of disdain. Dominic's breath caught in his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs. A wave of irrational jealousy, hot and stupid, surged through him, even though he knew he had no right to it, no claim on her anymore. Evelyn's smile vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving her face once again an impassive mask. "But don't mistake that for an invitation to claim anything." Dominic stared at her, helplessly fixated on her lips, on the curve he knew too well, on the memory of their feel against his. "Evelyn, I'm not trying to. You're trying to control," she cut in, her voice sharp, decisive. "I'm trying to understand. Understanding is what you want now." Her voice remained soft, almost conversational, but every word hit him like a carefully aimed slap, a precise, calculated blow. "After you signed your name and walked out like it was a business deal." Dominic's throat moved convulsively. It wasn't a business deal. Felt like one. He clenched his jaw, fighting back the memories that threatened to overwhelm him. He remembered that day too clearly, the sterile chill of the lawyer's office, the oppressive silence broken only by the scratch of pens on paper. Her eyes, glassy but fiercely proud, refusing to betray any hint of weakness. His own hands, surprisingly steady even while his insides were caving in, collapsing into a black hole of despair. He had told himself it was better this way, safer, cleaner, less messy. He had told himself a lot of things, carefully constructed lies designed to protect himself from the agonizing truth. Evelyn started walking again, her pace quickening slightly. Dominic followed, his long strides easily keeping pace with her. "Where are you going?" he asked, the question automatic, driven by a primal need to know, to protect. "Home." Dominic's gaze flicked involuntarily to her belly again, and this time she didn't attempt to block him, didn't raise her hand in a defensive gesture. "Alone?" he asked, the question laced with a possessiveness he couldn't quite suppress, and he hated himself for how raw, how intensely personal it sounded. Evelyn hesitated just for a fraction of a second, but it was enough. Yes, that single word, devoid of any inflection, set something off inside him, a primal instinct that had been dormant for months, but now roared back to life with terrifying force. It wasn't anger, not possessiveness, though those emotions were certainly present, lurking just beneath the surface. It was something far more fundamental, far more powerful: protectiveness. It was instant, unreasonable, and absolute. Dominic didn't slow his pace. "Then I'm walking you there." Evelyn let out a short, mirthless laugh that surprised him, a sound that was laced with humor, but also with a sharp, bitter edge. "You can't just decide that." "I can decide whatever I want," Dominic said automatically, the words tumbling out before he could censor them. Evelyn stopped again, pivoting to face him, her eyes blazing with a defiant fire. "There he is." Dominic blinked, momentarily taken aback by the unexpected vehemence in her tone. "The man who thinks his decisions are the law of the universe," she said, her voice deceptively calm, but her gaze unwavering. "You want to walk me home? Fine, but you will not raise your voice. You will not send any of your people after me, and you will not act like my body is a territory you're taking back." Dominic held her gaze, meeting her challenge head-on. Her eyes were the same as always, soft brown, flecked with gold, but they were not soft in spirit. She wasn't fragile, wasn't a damsel in distress. She had never been. He nodded once, slowly, deliberately. "Okay." Evelyn looked profoundly suspicious, as if she couldn't quite believe agreement that had come so easily, so unexpectedly. Dominic couldn't blame her. He didn't entirely trust it himself. They walked again, side by side, the silence between them thick and charged. The noise of the city wrapped around them like a shroud, the incessant drone of cars, the distant wail of sirens, a dog barking insistently from a balcony high above. A few blocks later, Evelyn glanced at him, her expression carefully neutral. "How did you even end up on that street?" Dominic's mouth tightened, a subtle sign of the tension building within him. "I was driving." "That's not an answer." Dominic almost smiled, despite the gravity of the situation. That line was achingly familiar, a relic of their shared past. Evelyn had always hated vague answers, evasiveness of any kind. She had once said that living with him was like living with a man who could negotiate anything, broker any deal except his own feelings. He looked ahead, focusing on the path in front of them. "I had a meeting." "With who?" He hesitated, weighing his options, then decided to keep it simple, to avoid delving into the labyrinthine complexities of his business dealings. "A contractor for a new property." Evelyn hummed noncommittally, the sound laced with skepticism, as if she didn't particularly care about the details of his business ventures. But her eyes flicked to him again, her gaze sharp and assessing. "So, you're building something?" Dominic heard the unspoken subtext, the veiled accusation. "You're always building, always expanding, always moving forward, always striving for more. Did you ever stop to think about what you broke in the process?" He swallowed hard, forcing himself to keep his voice even, controlled. "What about you?" Evelyn didn't look at him, her gaze fixed straight ahead. "What about me? Are you working?" he asked, the question hesitant, tentative. Evelyn's lips pressed together, forming a thin, disapproving line. "Yes." "What?" She gave him a look that suggested he was asking for her social security number, that he was crossing a line he had no right to cross. I'm not telling you everything, Dominic. Dominic's fingers flexed involuntarily, a subtle betrayal of his inner turmoil. I'm not trying to interrogate you, Evelyn. You don't know how to talk without it sounding like you're making a file, without it sounding like you're building a case, she retorted, the words sharp and accusatory. That stung because it was true. He had a tendency to analyze, to dissect, to categorize everything, including people and emotions. It was a habit he had cultivated over years, a defense mechanism designed to maintain control, to distance himself from the messy, unpredictable nature of human relationships. Dominic slowed his pace by half a step, creating a small but significant space between them. Evelyn, he said quietly, his voice laced with a sincerity he rarely allowed himself to express. I'm trying to do this right. She glanced over at him, her expression wary. There is no right way to do this, Dominic. That's not. Evelyn lifted her chin, her eyes flashing with a defiant spark. Dominic, you're not here because you suddenly became a different man, because you experienced some profound epiphany and transformed into a compassionate, understanding soul. You're here because you saw my belly, and your brain went into emergency mode, because your protective instincts kicked in, because you suddenly realized the implications of what you were seeing. Dominic didn't deny it. He couldn't. Honesty was the only currency he had left to offer. Evelyn exhaled slowly, a weary sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world. For a fleeting second, she looked tired, worn down by the relentless demands of life, exhausted from carrying everything alone. I don't need emergency mode, Dominic. I don't need you to swoop in and fix everything. I need peace. Dominic's voice softened, the harsh edges of his personality momentarily smoothed away. Are you at peace, Evelyn? Evelyn's steps slowed almost imperceptibly. She didn't answer immediately, her silence stretching between them like a taut wire. Then she said, her voice barely above a whisper, more than I was, that hit him like a physical bruise, a punch to the gut that left him winded and reeling. They turned onto a quieter street, lined with older buildings, their facades softened by time and neglect. A small coffee shop on the corner beckoned with its fogged windows and a chalkboard sign outside that proclaimed, in cheerfully crooked letters, "Hot chocolate today." Evelyn stopped abruptly in front of it, her gaze fixed on the sign. Dominic looked at her, confused. Why are we stopping? Evelyn pointed at the sign with a faint, almost imperceptible smirk. Because I want hot chocolate. Dominic blinked, momentarily thrown off balance by her unexpected request. Now? Yes, now. Evelyn, She lifted a brow, cutting him off before he could voice his objections. Oh, don't start, Dominic. It's not whiskey. It's not illegal. It's chocolate. Dominic opened his mouth to argue, then closed it again, realizing the futility of his resistance. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh, a sound that was tinged with a mixture of exasperation and reluctant amusement. You were never like this before. Evelyn's smile was quick and fleeting, a brief glimpse of the woman he remembered, the woman who had been buried beneath layers of resentment and disillusionment. Pregnancy is humbling, Dominic. It strips away your pretenses and exposes you to the raw, unfiltered emotions that you've been trying to suppress for years. I cried yesterday because a commercial had a puppy in it. Dominic stared at her, dumbfounded. You cried because of a puppy? Evelyn nodded, her expression perfectly serious, as if she was discussing a matter of profound importance. A very determined puppy. He tried not to smile but failed miserably. The corners of his mouth twitched upwards, betraying his amusement. Evelyn studied his expression, her gaze intense and probing, and something in her face shifted, softened, as if she was reminded of how easy it used to be to elicit warmth from him, to draw him out of his shell when no one else could. Then her guard returned, snapping back into place like a closing gate. She pushed the door open, releasing a wave of warm air redolent with the comforting scents of espresso and cinnamon. The coffee shop was cozy and inviting, a haven from the cold and the chaos of the city outside. A young couple sat at a table near the window, sharing a pastry and whispering conspiratorially. A teenage barista behind the counter looked up with the bored confidence of someone who had seen everything, who was immune to surprise. Her gaze landed on Dominic, and her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Dominic felt it instantly, the subtle shift in her demeanor, the flicker of recognition. Not of him exactly, but of what he represented. Money, power, danger. Some distorted story she'd heard from someone's cousin about a man who controlled the city from the shadows. Evelyn noticed, too. She stepped closer to Dominic, not touching him, but subtly positioning herself between him and the girl's fear, instinctively protecting him from the girl's unspoken judgment. Dominic's throat tightened again, choked with a mixture of anger and self-loathing. He hated the way his presence cast a shadow, the way his reputation preceded him, the way he inadvertently instilled fear in those around him. Evelyn walked to the counter, her movements purposeful and decisive. "Hot chocolate," she said to the barista, her voice clear and steady. Then, after a beat, she added, "with extra whipped cream." The barista blinked, momentarily disoriented by her calm demeanor. Sure." Evelyn glanced back at Dominic, her expression unreadable. "You want anything?" Dominic looked at her, his gaze intense, his emotions churning. The question itself felt too intimate, too loaded with unspoken meaning. "No." Evelyn tilted her head slightly, studying him with a critical eye. "You sure? Because you look like you need something." Dominic's eyes slid down to her mouth again, drawn by an invisible force, before he could stop them. "I do," he said, his voice low and husky, a barely audible murmur. Evelyn went still, her body tensing. The barista cleared her throat loudly, as if she was suddenly very interested in the intricate workings of the cash register. "Dominic," Evelyn warned, her voice soft but firm, a silent plea for restraint. He forced himself to look away, breaking the intense connection. He didn't want to push, didn't want to break the fragile thread of connection she had allowed him. Evelyn paid with a credit card Dominic didn't recognize, a sleek, minimalist card that was distinctly hers, not his, not a shared account. That small detail hit him harder than he expected, a stark reminder of their separate lives, of the chasm that had opened up between them. They moved to a small table in the corner, tucked away from the main flow of traffic. Dominic sat down across from her, his long frame seemingly too big, too imposing for the delicate chair. He looked out of place in the cozy coffee shop, a wolf in sheep's clothing, a figure who didn't belong in a world of soft lighting and indie music. Evelyn, on the other hand, seemed perfectly at home. She wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic mug when it came, inhaling deeply, closing her eyes for a second as if she was taking comfort seriously, as if the simple act of holding a cup of hot chocolate was a ritual of self-care. Dominic watched her, his gaze lingering on every detail. He watched the way her coat opened slightly to reveal a simple, elegant sweater beneath. The way her delicate necklace chain rested against her throat, the silver pendant catching the light. The way she held the mug, cradling it in her hands like it was a small piece of safety, a tangible symbol of warmth and security. "What?" she asked, her voice soft, her eyes still closed. Dominic blinked, startled by her perceptiveness. "Nothing." Evelyn opened one eye, her gaze sharp and knowing. "That's a lie." Dominic leaned back slightly in his chair, a subtle defensive maneuver. "You always knew when I was lying." Evelyn opened both eyes and met his gaze directly, her expression unreadable. "I always had to." Dominic swallowed, the words catching in his throat. "Why didn't you tell me?" Evelyn's hands tightened around the mug, her knuckles white. "Because the divorce was the first time in years I watched you choose something I didn't beg for." Dominic's chest tightened, the words hitting him like a physical blow. "I never wanted you to beg, Evelyn." Evelyn's laugh was soft and bitter, a sound that spoke volumes about the pain and resentment that had festered between them. "But you wanted me to wait, to be patient, to be understanding, to be the good wife who smiled at events and didn't ask why her husband kept leaving the room when his phone buzzed. You wanted me to be the silent partner, the the supportive spouse who didn't question your decisions or interfere with your ambitions. Dominic held still, his face an impassive mask, but his heart was pounding against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of guilt and regret. I wasn't cheating, Evelyn. You have to believe me. I didn't say you were. Her eyes stayed locked on his, unwavering, piercing, as if she was daring him to deny what she truly meant, to deny the fundamental truth of their relationship. Dominic exhaled slowly, releasing a pent-up breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I was trying to keep you safe, Evelyn. I was trying to protect you from the ugliness of my world. Evelyn's lips pressed together, forming a thin, disapproving line. There it is. What? The word you use when you don't want to say the real thing, the excuse you hide behind to justify your actions. Dominic's voice dropped, becoming low and intense. What's the real thing, Evelyn? What is it that you think I'm hiding? Evelyn leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering. That you didn't trust me enough to let me stand beside you as your equal, that you didn't believe I was strong enough to handle the truth, that you were afraid I would crumble under the weight of your secrets. Dominic stared at her, his mind racing, his heart aching. That was the truth, the devastating truth that had haunted him for years, the one he had buried deep beneath layers of meetings and rules and silence. He couldn't argue, couldn't deny it. Evelyn took a slow, deliberate sip of her hot chocolate, breaking the intense silence. The whipped cream touched her upper lip, leaving a delicate white mustache. She wiped it away with her thumb, then froze, her expression suddenly self-conscious, as if she realized how domestic the gesture looked, how easily it evoked the memory of their shared life, of the intimacy they had once shared. Dominic's gaze tracked the motion, his throat going tight. He remembered the feel of her skin, the taste of her lips, the scent of her hair. Evelyn noticed his gaze, her cheeks flushing a deeper shade of pink. Don't. Dominic held her gaze, his eyes filled with a longing he couldn't suppress. I'm not doing anything, Evelyn. You're doing that thing, she said softly, her voice barely audible above the murmur of the coffee shop. What thing? That look? She murmured, her eyes averted. Like you remember what my skin feels like you can still taste me on your lips. Dominic didn't blink, didn't flinch. I do. Silence stretched between them, thick and charged with unspoken desires, with the weight of their shared history. Evelyn looked down at her mug, her gaze fixed on the swirling pattern of the foam. This isn't going to happen, she said quietly, her voice devoid of emotion. Dominic's voice was steady, unwavering. What isn't going to happen, Evelyn? Us, she said. Not like before. Dominic leaned forward, placing his elbows on the table, careful not to invade her space, to respect her boundaries. Then not like before, Evelyn. Like now. Like something new. Evelyn's eyes lifted, meeting his gaze cautiously, her expression a mixture of hope and skepticism. You talk like you can rewrite months of reality in one sentence, like you can erase the pain and the hurt with a few carefully chosen words. Dominic's jaw tightened, his frustration building. I'm not trying to rewrite anything, Evelyn. I can't change the past. I'm trying to show up, to be present, to be the man you deserved all along. Evelyn studied him, her gaze probing, searching for the trick, for the hidden agenda. Why, Dominic? Why now? Why this sudden change of heart? Dominic's answer came too fast, too impulsively, driven by a force he couldn't control. Because I love you, Evelyn. I've always loved you. Evelyn's breath caught in her throat, her eyes widening in shock. The words hung there between them, simple and dangerous, laden with years of unspoken emotions. Evelyn's eyes glistened, but she blinked hard, pushing the tears back. You can't just say that, Dominic. You don't get to say that after everything that's happened. Dominic's voice went even softer, more gentle. Evelyn, I should have before. I'm sorry it took me so long. Evelyn swallowed, her throat working convulsively. She looked away toward the window, pretending to watch the people walk by, her reflection faintly trembling on the glass. You don't get to make this romantic, Dominic, she said, her voice strained. You don't get to rewrite our story and pretend that everything is going to be okay. Dominic's mouth curved slightly, just enough to make her glance back at him, her curiosity piqued. Evelyn, you're drinking hot chocolate with extra whipped cream. The romance is happening whether you allow it or not. Evelyn stared at him, her expression a mixture of annoyance and grudging amusement. Then, against her will, she laughed, a real laugh, short, surprised, like it had escaped her grasp. Dominic felt warmth spread through his chest, a feeling he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of lightness and hope that had been absent from his life for far too long. Evelyn shook her head, still smiling faintly. You're impossible, Dominic. You always have been. Dominic's eyes held hers, his expression softening. So are you, Evelyn? Her smile faded slowly as the weight of reality returned, as the memories of their past came flooding back. I'm not joking, Dominic, she said, her voice serious. I'm not either, Evelyn. Evelyn's fingers traced the rim of the mug, her touch gentle and hesitant. You can't just step back into my life because you saw me on a crosswalk, because you suddenly decided that you want to be a part of this. Dominic nodded once, slowly, deliberately. You're right, Evelyn. I can't. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her suspicion returning. So, what are you going to do, Dominic? What's your plan? Dominic's voice was calm, unwavering. Whatever you let me, Evelyn. I'm not going to force you to do anything you don't want to do. I'm not going to pressure you or manipulate you. I'm simply going to be here if you'll let me. Evelyn stared at him, her face softening, then hardening again, as if she was fighting a battle within herself, torn between her desire for connection and her fear of being hurt again. I don't want your people watching me, Dominic, she said, her voice laced with a warning. I don't want to be followed or monitored or analyzed. I want to be left alone to make my own decisions. Dominic didn't answer immediately because the truth was, the moment he had seen her on that crosswalk, his protective machine had turned on, his instincts had kicked into overdrive. He had already considered it, had already begun to formulate a plan in his head, had already mentally dispatched someone to gather information to keep her safe. He kept his face neutral, betraying no hint of his thoughts. You won't have them, Evelyn. Promise. Evelyn's gaze sharpened, as if she could sense lies the way other people sensed weather, as if she possessed an innate ability to detect deception. Promise, Dominic? Dominic held her eyes, his gaze unwavering. Promise. Evelyn exhaled slowly, releasing a pent-up breath. Okay, she said, her voice barely audible. The way she said it was not trust, not forgiveness. It was a test, a challenge. Dominic accepted it willingly. They left the coffee shop a few minutes later, stepping back out into the cold embrace of the city. The wind had picked up, swirling around them, whipping Evelyn's hair across her face. She pulled her coat tighter, shivering slightly. Dominic walked beside her again, his presence a silent offer of companionship, of protection. This time, he offered his arm without a word, an old habit, a gesture that spoke of shared history and ingrained affection. He didn't expect her to take it, but he felt compelled to offer it nonetheless. Evelyn looked at his arm, then at his face, her expression unreadable. For a moment, something tender flickered in her eyes, a fleeting glimpse of the woman he had loved, the woman he still loved. Then she didn't take his arm, but she moved half an inch closer, subtly narrowing the space between them. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it was everything. They reached a modest building with a narrow, dimly lit lobby. Evelyn stopped at the front door and pulled her keys from her bag, her movements quick and efficient. Dominic looked up at the windows, then back at her, his gaze filled with a mixture of concern and regret. You live here, Evelyn? Yes. Dominic's jaw tightened, not in judgment, not in disapproval, but in pain. He remembered the luxurious penthouse she used to wake up in, the silk sheets, the panoramic view, the state-of-the-art security system. He remembered her laughing in his sun-drenched kitchen while she made pancakes, her hair tousled, her face flushed with happiness. Dominic Russo, a man forged in the fires of a world where kindness was a weakness, not a virtue, survived by trusting no one but himself. He stared at the message on his phone. His jaw clenched so tight his teeth ached, and realized he was standing at a precipice. Before him lay the first true test. Would he safeguard her in the way he deemed necessary, or would he bend to her demands, her vision of protection? His thumb hovered over the screen, and before he could consciously halt the motion, a chilling thought slammed into him with the force of a physical blow, eclipsing even his fear. If she had concealed her pregnancy from him, what other secrets had she been forced to bury? And why did his gut scream that she wasn't merely alone, but meticulously guarded, shielding herself from someone or something? Dominic found sleep an impossible luxury that night. He lay on his back in the cavernous darkness of his bedroom, a space that suddenly felt oppressively large and empty, staring up at the ceiling as if it held the answers to the questions that swirled within him. Every time he succumbed to the urge to close his eyes, he was dragged back to that crosswalk, reliving the scene in excruciating detail. Evelyn's coat, the subtle swell beneath it, her measured steps, the unnerving calmness in her voice that belied the desperate plea in her eyes, begging him not to escalate the situation, and then the stark finality of the closing door. He had given her his word that he wouldn't pursue her, and so he wouldn't. But a promise couldn't override the primal instincts that thrummed beneath his skin. His phone lay on the nightstand, the screen casting a faint, ethereal glow, displaying the message from his head of security. Dominic reread it, his jaw tightening with each word. "Boss, you want me to pull info on Evelyn Carter's address and schedule?" He despised the question, and he despised even more the fact that it had been asked at all, a clear indication that his inner circle assumed he would readily agree. He typed a response, then deleted it, crafting and discarding versions until he finally settled on a terse, definitive no. Not without her consent. A heartbeat later, another message arrived. "Understood. But you saw what I saw, right? She looked like she's been watching her back." Dominic stared at the screen, his chest constricting. He had felt it too, that subtle yet unmistakable sense of unease. The way Evelyn's eyes had flickered across the street, cataloging every detail without appearing to do so. The way she had positioned herself near the coffee shop window, subtly angling her body to maintain a clear view of the outside. The way she had uttered, "Don't do this," in the street, as if acutely aware that someone might recognize him, and by extension her. Dominic locked the phone and placed it face down on the nightstand, as if silencing it could somehow quell the storm raging within him. He wouldn't break his promise, but he also refused to pretend he was indifferent. By morning, his resolve had solidified. He would approach her in a way that didn't smother her, that didn't trigger her defenses, which meant no phalanx of black SUVs lining her street, no men with earpieces casting long shadows, no overt displays of power, just him. He deliberately chose a jacket that blended in, that screamed normalcy, forgoing the usual suit and tie, anything that might betray his status. He hated how vulnerable the simple act made him feel. He drove himself, parked a full block away from the building she'd entered, and walked the remaining distance, feeling like a man attempting to relearn the most basic aspects of human interaction. The air was noticeably colder than the previous day, carrying a damp chill that seeped into his bones. The sidewalk glistened with the residue of overnight rain, reflecting the muted colors of the city. Dominic kept his hands buried deep in his pockets, a conscious effort to resist the urge to reach for his phone and do something rash, something impulsive. He stood across the street, his gaze fixed on the building, assessing it with a practiced eye. Modest, unassuming, no doorman, no imposing gates. Evelyn lived there alone. His stomach tightened at the thought. He waited 10 minutes, then 15, the silence amplifying the turmoil within him. He wasn't sure what he expected, perhaps her emerging, surprised to see him, her defenses momentarily lowered, allowing him a chance to try. Instead, a woman walked a small dog, its leash taut as it strained to explore the unfamiliar scents. A delivery guy hauled stacks of cardboard boxes inside, his face etched with fatigue. A young couple, their laughter echoing in the cold air, climbed the steps, their hands intertwined, clutching steaming coffee cups. Normal life, A life Evelyn had consciously chosen, a life that excluded him. Dominic drew a slow, deliberate breath, attempting to anchor himself in the present. He crossed the street and approached the entrance. Before he could reach the door, it swung open. Evelyn stepped out, her expression freezing the instant she saw him. Dominic stopped in his tracks, his hands still firmly planted in his pockets, a silent demonstration that he posed no threat. Evelyn's eyes scanned him with an intensity that was both unnerving and achingly familiar. She took in his clothes, his posture, his expression, dissecting every detail as if searching for hidden traps. "You said you wouldn't follow me," she stated, her voice carefully controlled. Dominic mirrored her composure. "I didn't." Evelyn's brows arched in disbelief. "You're standing in front of my building." "I came back," he clarified. "That's different." Evelyn stared at him, her expression a mixture of exasperation and something akin to reluctant amusement, as if she couldn't decide whether to laugh in his face or throw something at him. "That's the same thing with better vocabulary." Dominic's mouth twitched almost imperceptibly. "I'm trying." Evelyn's gaze flicked down to his hands, then back to his face, her eyes searching. "What do you want, Dominic?" The question was deceptively simple. The answer, however, was a tangled mess of conflicting emotions and unspoken desires. He could utter the words that clawed at his throat. "I want you back." He could demand, "I want my child." He could confess, "I want to fix what I broke." Instead, he chose to speak the truth that resonated most deeply within him. "I want to talk somewhere you feel safe." Evelyn's lips pressed into a thin line. Her shoulders were rigid with tension. But she didn't turn away, didn't retreat behind the walls she had so carefully constructed. She looked weary, a weariness that resonated with him, that made him want to reach out and hold her, not because she needed rescuing, but because no one should bear such a burden in solitude. "I'm going to work," she said, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic nodded, accepting her statement without argument. "Where?" Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her defenses rising once more. "No." Dominic exhaled slowly, acknowledging her boundaries. "Okay then, can I drive you?" Evelyn released a short, sharp sound that was equal parts laughter and disbelief. "Are you auditioning to be a normal ex-husband today?" Dominic's tone remained steady, unwavering. "I'm auditioning to be useful." Evelyn studied him for a long moment, her gaze intense, probing. Then her eyes drifted to the street, to the passing cars, to the corner, as if searching for an escape route. When she looked back, her expression had subtly shifted, becoming less defensive, more pragmatic. "No," she conceded. "But you can walk with me to the corner." "That's it." Dominic nodded, treating her concession as if it were a rare and precious gift. "Okay." They began walking, Evelyn setting a brisk pace. Dominic matched her stride, staying close enough to be present, to offer support, but not so close as to encroach upon her personal space. After a block, Evelyn broke the silence. "You look weird." Dominic blinked, momentarily taken aback. "Weird?" "You," she clarified, gesturing vaguely at his clothes. No suit, no polished Mafia king of the city costume. Dominic almost smiled, the familiar barb easing some of the tension that gripped him. "Is that what you think I dress like?" Evelyn's eyes flicked to him, her expression unreadable. "That's what you are." Dominic's chest tightened, the lightness of the moment dissipating. "I'm just a man." Evelyn gave him a look that could have shattered steel. "Dominic Russo, you're a lot of things. Just isn't one of them." He wanted to tell her that she used to be the only place where he felt ordinary, where he could shed the weight of his responsibilities and simply be himself. But he didn't. He kept his response simple, understated. "I didn't want to scare you." Evelyn's gaze softened for a fraction of a second, a flicker of vulnerability that quickly vanished, replaced by a hardened resolve, as if she resented the momentary lapse. "You don't scare me." Dominic's voice dropped, becoming low and intimate. "Then why did you tell me not to do it in the street?" Evelyn's steps slowed almost imperceptibly. She didn't answer immediately, weighing her words, carefully considering the implications. Dominic didn't push, allowing her the space she needed. Finally, Evelyn spoke, her voice barely audible above the sounds of the city. Because people talk. Dominic's jaw tightened, his protective instincts flaring. About me. About me, about you, she conceded, her gaze fixed on the sidewalk ahead. About anyone near you. Dominic felt a surge of heat rise in his chest, a mixture of anger and possessiveness. Who's talking about you? Evelyn's eyes slid away, avoiding his. No one. Dominic didn't believe her for a second. They reached the corner. A bus stop stood beneath a weathered metal awning, offering a meager shelter from the elements. A few people waited, their attention absorbed by their phones, their faces illuminated by the pale glow of the screens. Others sipped from paper cups, their eyes glazed over with the morning stupor. Evelyn stopped, her stance resolute, as if drawing an invisible line in the concrete. That's it, she said, her voice final. Dominic nodded, acknowledging her boundary. Okay. Evelyn shifted her weight, her hand instinctively brushing against her abdomen, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. Dominic's voice softened, filled with a concern he couldn't suppress. Are you eating? Evelyn blinked, momentarily thrown by the abrupt change in subject. What? Are you eating enough? He pressed, his eyes searching her face for any sign of distress. You look. Don't. She cut him off, her voice losing its sharp edge, replaced by a weary resignation. Don't start acting like you're my what? Dominic asked quietly, his gaze unwavering. My husband, Evelyn finished, her throat working as she swallowed hard. She looked at him then, and for a fleeting moment, Dominic caught a glimpse of the woman he had married, the woman who used to melt beneath his touch, whose eyes would soften when he whispered her name in the darkness. Then she blinked, and the walls went back up, the barriers firmly in place. You're not my husband, she stated, her voice devoid of emotion. Dominic nodded, acknowledging the truth of her words. I know. Evelyn's eyes searched his face, as if expecting him to argue, to challenge her assertion. When he didn't, her expression faltered, a flicker of vulnerability betraying the carefully constructed facade. A bus pulled up to the curb, its doors hissing open with a sigh of compressed air. Evelyn stepped toward it, then paused, hesitating. Dominic held still, allowing her to make her own decision. She turned her head slightly, not fully facing him, but enough for him to see the pain etched on her face. Don't show up again, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic's chest tightened, the unspoken plea in her words hitting him with the force of a physical blow. Evelyn. I mean it, she interrupted, finally meeting his gaze. Her eyes were glistening with unshed tears, but her voice remained steady, determined. Not because I hate you, because if you show up, it gets complicated. Dominic's voice was low, raw with emotion. It already is. Evelyn's lips trembled, but she quickly composed herself, hiding her vulnerability behind a mask of indifference. Goodbye, Dominic. She turned and boarded the bus, disappearing into the throng of passengers. Dominic stood on the sidewalk, watching through the window as she moved down the aisle and took a seat near the middle, facing forward, her back to him. She didn't look back, didn't offer a final glance, a parting gesture. The bus pulled away from the curb, its engine rumbling as it disappeared around the corner, swallowed by the city. Dominic remained rooted to the spot, his hands clenched tightly in his pockets, his jaw rigid with suppressed emotion. Then he did something he hadn't done in months, something that went against every instinct he possessed. He called his sister. Gio Russo answered on the second ring, her voice sharp, defensive. If this is about money, I swear to God, Dominic, I already... It's Evelyn, Dominic interrupted, his voice rough, barely a whisper. Silence descended on the line, heavy, pregnant with unspoken questions. Then Gia's voice softened, all traces of defensiveness vanishing. What about her? I saw her yesterday, Dominic said, the words still feeling surreal, detached from reality. She's pregnant. Another silence, even heavier than before, filled the space between them. Gia exhaled, a soft, almost imperceptible sound. "Dominic, it's mine," he said, his voice raw, pleading for understanding. Gia didn't argue, didn't question his certainty. She knew him too well, knew the depths of his character, the unwavering conviction that guided his actions. "Oh," she whispered, her voice filled with a mixture of surprise and compassion. "Oh, Dominic." He closed his eyes, the weight of his past, the weight of his decisions, pressing down on him with unbearable force. "She didn't tell me." Gia's tone sharpened, a protective instinct kicking in. Then something happened. Dominic's jaw tightened, his senses on high alert. "What do you mean?" Gia sighed, her voice tinged with regret. "Evelyn doesn't hide things for fun, Dominic. If she hid a pregnancy, it's because she thought it was safer." Dominic's stomach churned, a knot of dread forming in the pit of his stomach. "Safer from what?" Gia hesitated, her voice becoming cautious, measured. "From your world." Dominic opened his eyes, his gaze fixed on the wet sidewalk, as if it held the key to unlocking the secrets that surrounded him. Gia continued carefully, choosing her words with precision. "When you two divorced, she came to my place once." Dominic's head snapped up, his eyes wide with surprise. "She did?" "Yes," Gia confirmed, her voice low. "She said she didn't want you to know. She asked me not to tell you." Dominic's throat tightened, constricting his ability to speak. "What did she say?" "She didn't say much," Gia admitted, her voice laced with sadness. "But she looked like she'd been holding her breath for months, and she asked me one question." Dominic's voice went low, barely audible. "What question?" Gia swallowed hard, the sound amplified in the silence. "She asked if you had ever put your name on anything that could follow her." Dominic's blood ran cold, the implications of her question sending a chill down his spine. "Follow her." Gia's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Like paperwork, associations, people, enemies." She didn't use those words, but that's what she meant. Dominic's grip tightened around his phone, his knuckles turning white. "Gia, tell me everything." "I don't have everything," Gia said, her voice tinged with frustration. She left quickly, but before she walked out, she said something else. Dominic's heart hammered against his ribs. His senses heightened, anticipating the blow. "What?" Gia hesitated, as if reluctant to ignite the fire that threatened to consume his world with a single sentence. Then she said it anyway. She said, "If he ever finds out, he'll try to fix it, and fixing it is what will get us hurt." Dominic's chest constricted so hard it hurt, the weight of her fear, her sacrifice, crushing him. "Us." "Yes," Gia said softly, her voice filled with compassion. She said, "Us," like she already knew. Dominic stared at the street, his mind racing, piecing together the fragments of information, trying to make sense of the puzzle. Evelyn had been careful, meticulously planning every move. Evelyn had been scanning the sidewalks, her eyes constantly searching for potential threats. Evelyn had been living smaller, quieter, as if trying to disappear, to erase herself from the radar. Not because she didn't love him, but because she did. And love near him came with shadows, with consequences. Dominic's voice turned still, devoid of emotion. "Did she tell you who she was scared of?" Gia exhaled, a sound of resignation. "No." Dominic's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharpening. "But you think it's real?" Gia didn't hesitate, her voice filled with conviction. "I know it's real." Dominic ended the call with a quiet goodbye, his mind already racing, formulating a plan of action. He stood there for a moment, breathing through a tight chest, trying to regain control. Then he walked back to his car, his steps purposeful, driven by a fierce determination. He drove without music, without calls, without distractions, his focus laser-sharp, his grip on the steering wheel unwavering, as if it were the only thing keeping him grounded, preventing him from spiraling into the abyss. He didn't go to his office, didn't engage in the usual routines of his life. He went to the one person in his world who didn't deal in fear, only in facts, the one person he could trust implicitly. His attorney. The man looked up, startled, when Dominic entered his office unannounced. "Mr. Russo, this is unexpected." Dominic didn't engage in pleasantries. His demeanor was all business, his eyes cold and demanding. "I need to know if my name is tied to anything that could touch Evelyn Carter." The attorney blinked, momentarily taken aback by the intensity of Dominic's gaze. "Your ex-wife." Dominic's eyes were like chips of ice, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Answer." The attorney cleared his throat, his nervousness palpable. He stood up, attempting to regain his composure. "There are several entities, holdings, properties, shells, legal structures. It would take time." Dominic leaned forward slightly, his presence radiating power and menace. "Start now." The attorney nodded rapidly, his face paling, and moved to his desk, pulling files, typing furiously on his keyboard. Minutes ticked by, each one stretching into an eternity. Dominic's patience was razor-thin, threatening to snap. Then the attorney froze, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. His face went ashen, his eyes wide with shock. Dominic's stomach dropped, a cold dread washing over him. "What?" The attorney's eyes lifted to Dominic, his expression conveying a sense of profound unease. "There's a clause." Dominic's voice was low, dangerous. "What clause?" The attorney swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing nervously. "The divorce settlement, a confidentiality clause." It wasn't unusual. But what?" Dominic snapped, the sharpness in his voice making the attorney flinch. "But it was triggered," the attorney said, his voice shaking, barely above a whisper. 2 months ago." Dominic's blood went hot, a surge of adrenaline coursing through his veins. "Triggered by who?" The attorney's hand trembled as he turned the laptop screen slightly, angling it so Dominic could see. "A third party requested verification of the clause through one of the entities connected to your name." Dominic stared at the screen, his mind reeling, his senses overwhelmed. He felt like he was staring down the barrel of a gun, the weapon pointed directly at Evelyn's door. "A third party?" Dominic said slowly, his voice laced with incredulity. "Who?" The attorney hesitated, his eyes darting nervously between Dominic and the screen. Dominic's voice went quieter, more dangerous, the threat implicit in his tone. "Say the name." The attorney swallowed hard, his face glistening with perspiration. He closed his eyes briefly, took a deep breath, then read the name off the screen. Dominic's phone slipped slightly in his hand, the unexpectedness of the revelation throwing him off balance. The name wasn't a rival boss, wasn't a member of a competing crime family. It wasn't a criminal, wasn't someone involved in his world. It was a woman's name, and Dominic knew it. Harper Lane. A name from his past that should have been buried, forgotten, rendered harmless by the passage of time. A name Evelyn had never once mentioned, had never even hinted at. Dominic stood there, frozen in place, as one terrifying thought landed with perfect clarity, the implications sending a wave of nausea through him. If Harper Lane had resurfaced, then Evelyn hadn't been hiding from strangers, hadn't been running from unknown threats. She had been hiding from someone who knew exactly how to reach Dominic Russo, someone who understood his weaknesses, someone who could exploit his vulnerabilities. And now somehow, impossibly, she knew about the baby. Dominic didn't go to Evelyn. Not that day, not the next. And it nearly tore him apart, the restraint requiring every ounce of self-control he possessed. Every instinct he had, every fiber of his being, told him to move fast, to confront the problem head-on, to cut it off before it grew teeth, before it had a chance to inflict harm. Harper Lane's name burned in his head like a warning siren, a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the shadows. A woman from his past, intelligent, resourceful, and dangerous in the quietest, most insidious way. Someone who knew how his world worked without ever being officially part of it. Someone who could manipulate the system from within. But Evelyn had been clear, emphatic. Don't show up again. So Dominic did the hardest thing a man like him could do. He waited. He shifted the battlefield inward instead of outward, focusing his energy on protecting Evelyn from afar. He engaged lawyers, sifting through legal documents, creating paper trails, erecting silent protections that didn't leave fingerprints, that wouldn't alert Harper Lane to his awareness. He stripped his name from dormant entities, rerouted holdings, froze accounts that no one had touched in years, meticulously erasing any trace of his connection to Evelyn. He didn't ask questions yet, didn't seek to uncover the truth behind Harper Lane's sudden reappearance. He prepared, bracing himself for the inevitable confrontation, and all the while he thought about Evelyn, about the way her laugh had slipped out in the coffee shop, a spontaneous expression of joy she hadn't meant to reveal, about how she stood straighter now, more resilient, even while carrying the weight of something that should have been shared, something they should have faced together. 3 days passed, each one an agonizing test of his patience, a constant battle against his protective instincts. On the 4th day, she came to him, not by design, not by intent, but by accident, their paths colliding in the most unexpected way. Dominic was leaving a low-profile restaurant just past noon, phone pressed to his ear, engaged in a conversation he barely registered, when he saw her across the street. Evelyn stood outside a small medical office, her posture revealing her discomfort. One hand braced on her lower back, the other gripping a folded paper bag. Her face was pale, her jaw clenched tight, as if she was silently enduring something unpleasant, something painful. Dominic ended the call without a word, disconnecting abruptly, his focus shifting entirely to Evelyn. He didn't cross the street immediately, didn't rush to her side, didn't betray the urgency that consumed him. He waited, forcing himself to remain still, to project an air of nonchalance. He waited until she looked up, until her eyes met his. This time she didn't freeze, didn't recoil. She simply sighed, a deep, tired sound that carried more emotion, more vulnerability, than any argument, any accusation. "Of course," she muttered, loud enough for him to hear over the sounds of the city, the words laced with a mixture of resignation and wry amusement. Dominic crossed the street when the light changed, moving slower than his instincts dictated, stopping a careful distance away, respecting her boundaries. "Hi," he said, his voice soft, gentle. Evelyn looked at him, her eyes conveying a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion, a weariness of the soul. She seemed too tired to maintain the pretense of indifference, too drained to fight. "You didn't listen." "I did," Dominic replied, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't come to you." Her eyes flicked around, assessing their surroundings, then back to him, her expression questioning. "Then why are you here?" Dominic held her gaze, his sincerity evident. "Because the city's not that big." She huffed a humorless laugh, the sound devoid of joy. "Tell that to fate." For a moment, neither spoke, the silence hanging heavy between them, filled with unspoken emotions, with unresolved conflicts. Then Evelyn's face tightened, her features contorting slightly. She shifted her weight again, her discomfort becoming increasingly evident. Dominic's voice softened, laced with concern. "Are you okay?" She hesitated, a telltale beat too long, betraying her carefully constructed facade. "It's nothing," she said, her voice dismissive, attempting to downplay her discomfort. "Just a long morning." Dominic glanced at the sign behind her, his eyes drawn to the words printed in bold letters. "Prenatal care." The words resonated within him, evoking a complex mix of emotions, from a profound sense of tenderness to a fierce protectiveness. It wasn't a dramatic revelation, no sudden epiphany, but a slow, creeping realization, a deeper understanding of the profound intimacy they now shared, the unbreakable bond that connected them. His chest tightened, his heart swelling with an emotion he couldn't quite name. "Can I walk you?" he asked, the offer simple, understated, but filled with unspoken meaning. Evelyn opened her mouth to refuse, her defenses automatically rising. Then she stopped, her expression changing, her resistance crumbling. Her shoulders dropped slightly, as if she'd lost a silent battle with herself, as if she'd finally reached the limits of her endurance. "Fine," she said, her voice barely audible, almost grudging. But only to the corner. They began to walk, the silence between them different this time. It wasn't sharp, guarded, or accusatory. It was heavy, laden with unspoken words, with unacknowledged emotions, with a shared understanding of the delicate situation they found themselves in. After half a block, Evelyn broke the silence, her voice almost casual. "You look tired." Dominic almost smiled, the familiar observation bringing a sense of comfort, a reminder of their shared history. "You always notice that." "I noticed patterns," she replied, her gaze fixed on the sidewalk ahead. "It's how I survived being married to you." He accepted the jab without argument, acknowledging the validity of her statement. "You were good at it." She glanced at him, a flicker of amusement in her eyes. "Still are." That surprised him, the admission unexpected, almost disarming. "Surviving me?" "No," she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Reading you." They stopped at a crosswalk, the mundane task taking on a new significance. Another crosswalk, another reminder of the day their lives had irrevocably changed. Not the same one as before, but close enough to make Dominic's chest ache, close enough to evoke the memories he had tried so hard to suppress. Evelyn hugged the paper bag closer to herself, a protective gesture that spoke volumes. Dominic waited until the light turned red again, bringing the flow of traffic to a halt, before he spoke, choosing his words with care. "I didn't come to ask for anything." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, her expression skeptical. "That's new." "I came to say I know about Harper," he stated, his voice direct, unwavering. Her steps slowed almost imperceptibly, then stopped altogether. She didn't turn to face him right away, allowing herself a moment to compose herself, to prepare for the inevitable confrontation. When she did, her face was controlled, her features carefully composed, but her eyes betrayed her, revealing the fear and anxiety that churned beneath the surface. "How?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic didn't dodge the question, didn't attempt to soften the blow. "My attorney." Evelyn exhaled slowly, a long, drawn-out breath that seemed to release a pent-up tension she had been holding for months. "Then you know why I didn't tell you." "I know you were protecting the baby," he said, his voice filled with understanding. "And yourself." "And you," she added softly, her voice barely audible. Dominic shook his head, his disagreement vehement. "You don't protect me by disappearing, Evelyn. You don't protect me by shutting me out." Evelyn's voice sharpened, her defenses rising once more. "You don't protect me by staying, Dominic. You don't protect me by bringing your world crashing down on me." That landed between them like a fragile truth, a painful acknowledgement of the reality of their situation. Traffic moved, cars honking impatiently, the sounds of the city swirling around them. People passed by, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding on the corner. The city kept breathing, its rhythm indifferent to their personal struggles. Dominic lowered his voice, his tone becoming more urgent, more persuasive. "She doesn't get near you, Evelyn. I won't let her." Evelyn studied him, her gaze searching, probing, attempting to discern his true intentions. "That's not a promise you can keep without making noise, Dominic. That's not a promise you can fulfill without drawing attention." "I can keep it quietly," he said, his voice unwavering. "I can protect you without alerting her to my presence." "That's what scares me," she confessed, her voice barely above a whisper. "The silence, the shadows, the things I can't see coming." Dominic stepped closer, narrowing the space between them, not crowding her, not overwhelming her, just close enough that she could feel his presence, that she could sense his unwavering support. "Evelyn, look at me," he pleaded, his voice filled with sincerity. She didn't want to, her reluctance evident in her averted gaze, her tense posture. She did anyway, forcing herself to meet his eyes, to confront the emotions that swirled within her. "I'm not here to take over your life, Evelyn," he said, his voice gentle, reassuring. "I'm not here to control you, to dictate your decisions. I'm here because I love you, because I care about you, And because I'm not letting you carry this alone anymore. Her lips parted slightly, her breath catching in her throat. The raw honesty in his words, the vulnerability in his eyes, took her by surprise, disarming her defenses. You don't get to decide that, she protested, her voice barely a whisper. I know, he said, acknowledging her autonomy, respecting her boundaries. You do. It's your choice, Evelyn. Always. She searched his face, looking for any sign of deceit, any hint of manipulation, any trace of the man she had left, the man who had suffocated her with his control, his arrogance, his unwavering belief that he knew what was best for her. What she found instead unsettled her, challenged her preconceived notions. She saw patience, a willingness to wait, to earn her trust, to respect her decisions. She saw remorse, a deep-seated regret for the mistakes he had made, a genuine desire to make amends. She saw a flicker of hope, a fragile ember that threatened to ignite into a raging fire. Why now? She asked, her voice barely audible, the question a plea for understanding. Why are you doing this now? Dominic didn't hesitate, didn't offer a carefully constructed excuse. His response was immediate, visceral, driven by a truth that resonated deep within his soul. Because I almost lost you without realizing it, Evelyn. Because I came so close to losing the most important thing in my life, and I can't let that happen again. Her eyes filled with tears, glistening with unshed emotions. She blinked fast, angry at herself for betraying her vulnerability, for allowing him to see the cracks in her armor. You already lost me once, she whispered, her voice laced with pain, a haunting reminder of their fractured past. Dominic's voice broke just slightly, the emotion raw and unfiltered. I know, Evelyn. I know. The light changed, signaling the start of a new cycle. They crossed the street together, walking in unison, their steps mirroring each other, a subtle indication of the connection that still bound them, despite the obstacles that stood in their way. At the corner, Evelyn stopped, as she had done before, drawing an invisible line in the sand. But this time, she didn't immediately step away, didn't retreat behind her walls. She looked at him, her gaze intense, probing, searching. Really? She asked, the single word conveying a multitude of emotions. Really looked. I'm not weak, Dominic, she said, her voice resolute. I don't need saving. I've survived on my own, and I can continue to do so. I know, Dominic replied, his voice filled with sincerity. I admire your strength, Evelyn. I respect your independence. I won't be owned, managed, or hidden, she continued, her voice unwavering, her determination absolute. I won't be controlled, manipulated, or silenced. I refuse to be a pawn in your world. Dominic's mouth curved faintly, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. You never were, Evelyn. You were always your own person, fiercely independent, unyielding in your convictions. That's one of the things I loved most about you. Silence stretched between them, the unspoken emotions hanging heavy in the air. Then Evelyn did something unexpected, something that caught him completely off guard, shattering his carefully constructed composure. She reached out, her movements deliberate, almost hesitant, and placed Dominic's hand gently on her belly. Just for a second, just long enough for him to register the warmth, the movement, the life that pulsed beneath his fingertips. Dominic froze, his breath hitching hard in his throat, his senses overwhelmed by the profound significance of the gesture. Warmth, movement, life, a tangible reminder of the miracle they had created, the future they could potentially share. Evelyn watched his face carefully, her eyes searching, scrutinizing, measuring the man he was becoming, assessing whether he was truly capable of change. Then she took her hand back, breaking the connection, retreating behind her defenses once more. You can come to the next appointment, she said quietly, her voice barely audible. But only if you don't bring the world with you, Dominic. Only if you come as yourself, without the entourage, without the power, without the baggage. Dominic nodded, his throat tight with emotion, his heart swelling with a mixture of hope and gratitude. I won't, he promised, his voice husky with emotion. She stepped back, creating distance between them, reinforcing the boundaries she had established. This doesn't mean we're anything, Dominic. This doesn't erase the past, doesn't negate the hurt, doesn't guarantee a future. Dominic held her gaze, his expression unwavering, his sincerity palpable. It means we're honest, Evelyn. It means we're finally being honest with each other, acknowledging the truth of our emotions, confronting the realities of our situation. Evelyn hesitated, her eyes searching. He chose a seat near the wall, a strategic vantage point offering a view of the entrance and a sense of enclosed security. Disciplined, he composed himself. He folded his hands, the knuckles showing white against his skin, and deliberately forced his shoulders to relax, releasing the tension he hadn't realized he was holding. Then the door swung inward. Evelyn stepped inside. She had chosen a soft gray dress for the day, a flowing, elegant garment that subtly accentuated the gentle curve of her belly. It was a dress that whispered of comfort and grace. Her hair, usually bound up, was loose, cascading around her face in waves that stirred something ancient and dangerously compelling within him. It was a visceral reaction, a primal recognition. Her eyes, the color of deep sea after a storm, found him instantly. She stopped just inside the doorway, not startled, not visibly tense, but utterly still, like a deer caught in headlights but choosing not to flee. Dominic rose slowly, consciously moderating his movements, careful not to rush her, not to startle her into retreat. "Hi!" The word was soft, a tentative offering. Evelyn studied him, her gaze unwavering, searching. "You're early." It wasn't an accusation, merely an observation. "I didn't want to be late." He kept his tone even neutral. A pause stretched between them, thick with unspoken words and unresolved emotions. Then quietly, almost shyly, she said, "Thank you." They stood there, suspended in an awkward intimacy, close yet distant, like strangers who vaguely remembered being lovers in a past life. Evelyn gestured toward the chairs with a slight inclination of her head. "Sit. People will stare." Dominic almost smiled. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "They already are." Her gaze flickered around the waiting room, assessing, calculating. "You stand out." "I try not to. That's new." A hint of amusement danced in her eyes. They sat in silence for a few minutes, the air around them humming with unacknowledged energy. Evelyn's hands rested protectively on her belly, fingers interlaced as if guarding a precious secret. Dominic noticed how a subtle calm seemed to settle over her in that place, in that moment, as if the clinic had become a small, temporary sanctuary for her. "You didn't bring anyone," she said at last, her voice barely above a whisper. Dominic met her gaze, his own unwavering. "I said I wouldn't." She nodded, a small, almost imperceptible movement, as if ticking off items on an internal checklist. "Good." A nurse's voice cut through the quiet hum of the waiting room. "Evelyn Carter?" Evelyn stood, then hesitated, glancing back at Dominic, her expression unreadable. "You're coming," she stated, not as a question, but as a quiet expectation. Dominic stood immediately, without hesitation. Yes, the exam room was softly lit. The walls painted a soothing shade of blue. The air was sterile, yet strangely comforting. Evelyn sat on the edge of the examination bed, her posture slightly rigid, while the nurse went through a series of routine questions, her voice professionally cheerful. Dominic remained quiet, a solid, reassuring presence, his hands clasped loosely in front of him, listening intently to the mundane details. When the nurse excused herself to retrieve the doctor, the room settled into a deeper, more intimate silence. Evelyn swung her feet slightly, a subtle indication of nervous energy surfacing beneath her composed facade. "This is the part where you don't make jokes." Her tone was half serious, half teasing. Dominic raised a brow, a flicker of amusement in his eyes. "I never joke." She snorted, a brief, involuntary sound. "Liar." The door opened again, and the doctor entered, radiating warmth and professional competence. She greeted Evelyn first, her manner reassuring and friendly, then nodded politely at Dominic, offering no questions, making no assumptions. Dominic appreciated that understated respect. As Evelyn lay back on the examination table and the exam began, Dominic moved to stand near her head, close enough that she could feel his presence, but not touching, giving her space while offering silent support. Then, the sound filled the room, a rapid, steady, rhythmic pulse, amplified by the Doppler. Evelyn froze, her breath caught in her throat. Dominic leaned closer without conscious thought, his gaze fixed on her face. "Is that?" The question was a breathless whisper. The doctor smiled, her expression gentle. "That's the heartbeat." Evelyn's eyes filled instantly, tears welling up and spilling over. Dominic felt something deep inside him crack wide open, a dam breaking, releasing a flood of emotions he had long suppressed. The sound was so strong, so insistent, so undeniably alive. His chest tightened so hard he had to swallow, fighting back the lump in his throat. Evelyn turned her head toward him, tears streaming down her face now, unashamed, unreserved. "It's real," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Dominic nodded, unable to speak, his own vision blurring with unshed tears. The doctor continued explaining things, weeks, progress, measurements, but Dominic barely heard her. All he could hear was that sound, that primal rhythm hammering life into the small room. When it was over, Evelyn sat up slowly, wiping her cheeks with the back of her hand. She laughed softly, a self-deprecating sound. "I told myself I wouldn't cry this time." Dominic finally found his voice, his tone rough with emotion. "You don't have to be strong here." Her eyes met his, searching, questioning. "You don't get to say that lightly." "I know," he said, his voice firm, unwavering. "I mean it carefully." They left the office together, stepping out into the brighter, lighter air of the city. Evelyn walked a little slower now, her movements more deliberate, more mindful. Dominic matched her pace, adjusting his stride to hers. "I didn't plan to let you hear that today," she admitted, her voice low. "I'm glad you did," Dominic replied, his gaze fixed on her face. She glanced at him, her expression wary. "That doesn't mean you get access to everything." "I know," he conceded. "But it means I'm not shutting you out," she added, her voice softer now. Dominic stopped walking, halting in the middle of the sidewalk. Evelyn noticed and turned to face him, her brow furrowed slightly. "That matters," he said quietly, his voice filled with a sincerity that resonated deep within her. Her expression softened, the hard edges of her guardedness beginning to crumble. "It scares me." "Me too." They stood there facing each other on the sidewalk, two figures caught in a private moment while the city swirled around them, oblivious to their silent struggle. Evelyn broke the tension first, her voice lighter now, almost playful. "I'm hungry." Dominic blinked, momentarily startled by the abrupt change in subject, then smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that reached his eyes. "Of course you are. There's a diner 2 blocks down," she said. "Nothing fancy. Perfect." The diner was warm and loud, a classic greasy spoon joint with all the charm of a well-worn memory. All chrome edges and cracked vinyl seats, the air thick with the smell of frying bacon and stale coffee. They slid into a booth near the window, the worn vinyl groaning beneath their weight. Evelyn studied the laminated menu, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Seriously, I want pancakes." Dominic leaned back in his seat, his eyes twinkling with amusement. "At noon?" "Yes." "With syrup and bacon?" She met his gaze, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "Absolutely." He laughed quietly, a warm, genuine sound that made her heart skip a beat. "You're dangerous." She smiled, a real smile, not the guarded, tentative smiles she had been offering him earlier. "You have no idea." As they waited for their food, conversation came easier, flowing more naturally. Small things, harmless things, inconsequential details that built a bridge of normalcy between them. She told him about the quirky little bookstore near her apartment, a haven filled with the scent of old paper and forgotten stories. He told her about a terrible attempt at cooking he'd made the week before, a culinary disaster involving burnt garlic and a smoking pan. You cooked? She teased, her eyes sparkling with amusement. I burned water. She laughed, shaking her head in disbelief. You used to make fun of me for following recipes. I miss that, he said before he could stop himself, the words slipping out before he had time to censor them. Silence fell between them, not heavy or uncomfortable, but thoughtful, pregnant with unspoken memories. Evelyn spoke carefully, choosing her words with precision. I miss parts of us, too. A flicker of hope stirred within him, cautious and fragile, like a newly sprouted seedling pushing its way through hard-packed earth. Their food arrived, breaking the tension. They ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the clinking of silverware and the murmur of conversations around them. At one point, a drop of syrup dripped onto Evelyn's finger. She wiped it with a napkin, then paused, looking slightly embarrassed. Dominic smiled softly, a tender, affectionate smile that spoke volumes. Still messy. She rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched with amusement. Still observant. After they paid the bill, they stood outside again, lingering on the sidewalk, reluctant to break the fragile connection they had reestablished. This doesn't mean we're back together, Evelyn said, her voice firm, but not unkind. I know, Dominic replied, his gaze unwavering. But, she added, her voice quieter now, almost hesitant, it means I'm willing to see who you are now. Dominic held her gaze, his heart pounding in his chest. And who are you now? She rested a hand protectively on her belly, her expression softening. Someone who won't disappear again. His chest tightened, a surge of emotion rising within him. Neither will I. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, searching his eyes for any sign of deception. Then she nodded once, a small, almost imperceptible movement that spoke of cautious acceptance. We'll see. She turned to leave, then paused, glancing back at him. Dominic. Yes. Don't make me regret this. His answer was immediate, unwavering. I won't. She walked away, her figure receding into the bustling city crowd. Dominic watched her go, his heart both full and restless, filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. Because for the first time since the divorce, the future wasn't closed off, but it wasn't safe either. And both of them knew that opening that door again meant old truths would soon demand to be spoken. Old wounds would be exposed to the light. Dominic didn't call her that night. He wanted to badly, the urge a physical ache in his chest. He sat in the quiet of his sterile penthouse. The glittering cityscape spread out below him like a fragile promise, lights twinkling as if nothing could ever fall apart. And he stared at his phone, his thumb hovering over her number, until the screen went dark, the reflection of his own conflicted face staring back at him. He could picture Evelyn walking back to her apartment, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the other gripping her keys like a weapon, ready to defend herself against any perceived threat. He could picture her locking the door, the sound echoing in the small space, and leaning back against it, her shoulders slumping with exhaustion, breathing out a sigh she'd been holding in for hours, releasing the tension she carried like a shield. And he could picture her whispering to herself, a silent mantra of self-preservation, don't get pulled in again. So Dominic did the opposite of what the old him, the impulsive, demanding Dominic, would have done. He didn't chase, he prepared. He spent the next 2 days doing quiet, meticulous work that didn't involve threats, broken doors, or unwelcome visitors. He sat with his attorney, poring over documents, reviewing structures, clauses, names tied to names, unraveling the tangled web of his past. He removed paths, cutting off access, eliminating vulnerabilities. He closed doors that never should have existed in the first place, sealing them shut against the darkness. And all the while, one thought kept pushing forward in his mind, louder than the rest, clearer than any legal jargon. Evelyn hadn't hidden the pregnancy because she didn't want him. She had hidden it because she didn't want his world anywhere near her child. That truth didn't offend him. It humbled him, forcing him to confront the darkness within himself and the destructive force he had once wielded so carelessly. On the third day, Evelyn texted him first. Just one line, stark and direct. Tomorrow, 10:30. Don't be late. Don't be dramatic. Dominic stared at the message as if it were a miracle written in plain English, a lifeline thrown across a vast chasm. Then he typed back, his fingers moving slowly, deliberately. I'll be there. I'll be normal. 3 dots appeared on the screen, indicating she was typing. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of anticipation and anxiety. Then Evelyn replied, her words laced with a dry humor. You don't know how to be normal. Just be quiet. Dominic smiled to himself, a slow curve of warmth he hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of hope igniting in the darkness. Quiet, he typed. Got it. The next morning, he arrived 10 minutes early again, because some habits ingrained over a lifetime were impossible to break. But this time, he didn't go inside immediately. He waited in the car, parked a discreet distance from the clinic, until he saw Evelyn. She stepped out of a rideshare at the curb, her movements graceful and deliberate. Her hair was pinned back, revealing the delicate curve of her neck, and a soft scarf was wrapped loosely around her neck, partially concealing her throat. She looked composed, almost serene, but Dominic, with his keen eye for detail, noticed the subtle signs of strain. How she paused before stepping onto the sidewalk, her hesitation barely perceptible. How her eyes scanned to the left before she moved, as if she were checking for someone she didn't want to see, a silent sentinel guarding her from unseen threats. Dominic got out of the car, his movements slow and steady, deliberately non-threatening. Evelyn saw him and walked over, her expression guarded, but not distant. Something in her face had shifted since the diner, a subtle softening, a weary resignation, less guarded, more tired, as if she decided that resisting him completely took too much energy, that she simply didn't have the strength for a full-scale battle. You're early, she said, her voice flat. I'm learning, Dominic replied, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. Evelyn's mouth twitched, a brief, involuntary movement. No, you're obsessing. I can do both. That pulled a short, unwilling laugh from her, a brief flash of genuine amusement that warmed him from the inside out. Dominic held the door open for her, and they went inside together, 2 figures walking into an uncertain future. The appointment was routine, a series of mundane tasks that masked the profound significance of the moment. Blood pressure check, questions about her diet and sleep patterns, quick reassurances from the doctor that everything was progressing normally. Dominic stayed quiet, respecting her request, a silent observer in her world. He listened intently, absorbing every detail. He watched her, his gaze unwavering, studying her face for any sign of discomfort or distress. He tried not to look too stunned every time the doctor said something like, "You're doing great, Evelyn," because it made him want to say it, too, to shower her with praise and admiration for her strength and resilience. Afterward, they walked out into the crisp air and the bright noise of the city, the sounds and smells assaulting their senses after the sterile quiet of the clinic. Evelyn exhaled, a long, slow breath that seemed to release a sliver of the tension she had been carrying. Okay. Dominic glanced at her, his expression questioning. Okay, what? Okay. I'm hungry again, she admitted, her voice laced with a hint of self-deprecation, as if admitting a shameful secret. Dominic's eyes softened, his gaze filled with affection. Of course. Evelyn rolled her eyes, but her lips twitched with a smile. Don't say it like you're proud. I am proud, he said simply, his voice firm and unwavering. She stopped walking, halting abruptly in the middle of the sidewalk. Dominic stopped too immediately, as if he'd crossed an invisible line, his expression instantly contrite. Evelyn studied him, her gaze intense and searching. Of what? Dominic didn't flinch, didn't look away. Of you. Of how you're handling all of this. Evelyn's gaze dropped to her belly, then flicked back up to meet his. Her eyes sharp with an emotion she didn't want to show, a mixture of vulnerability and defiance. You don't get to watch me suffer and then compliment me for surviving it. Dominic's chest tightened, a wave of empathy washing over him. I'm not complimenting your pain. I'm acknowledging your strength. Evelyn stared at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she said, her voice quieter now, almost a whisper, "Strength gets lonely." Dominic's voice dropped to match hers, his tone intimate and sincere. "Then let me be there." Evelyn's eyes searched his face, suspicious of his sudden tenderness. "You want to be there because of the baby?" Dominic didn't deny it. He met her gaze squarely, his expression unwavering. "Yes." He paused, then added, his voice filled with a raw honesty. "And because of me." Dominic's answer was immediate, unwavering. "Mostly because of you. That did it." Something inside Evelyn cracked, a subtle shift in her emotional landscape, a barely perceptible tremor that betrayed the carefully constructed facade she had erected around her heart. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a subtle shift in her breathing, a slight softening of her features, like something inside her had softened and frightened her at the same time. She turned away slightly, pretending to adjust her scarf, concealing her expression from his probing gaze. "There's a place," she said, her voice careful, almost hesitant. "A small Italian bakery. I go there sometimes." Dominic's mouth curved into a warm, genuine smile. "Lead the way." The bakery was warm and inviting, filled with the intoxicating aroma of butter and sugar, a comforting haven from the harsh realities of the outside world. Evelyn ordered with the focus of a woman on a mission, her brow furrowed in concentration as she considered the array of pastries displayed behind the glass counter. 2 pastries, one for now, one for later, and a tea that the cashier promised was pregnancy-friendly, said with a reverence that suggested it was a sacred category, a beverage blessed by the gods of motherhood. Dominic paid before Evelyn could reach for her wallet, sliding his credit card across the counter with a smooth, practiced motion. She glared at him, her eyes flashing with annoyance. "You don't have to." "I want to," Dominic said simply, his gaze fixed on her face. Evelyn narrowed her eyes, her expression suspicious. "Dominic Russo, don't start buying your way back in." Dominic leaned closer, his voice low enough that only she could hear, his breath warm against her ear. "Evelyn Carter, I am not buying. I'm offering." Her lips parted slightly, but no words came, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic mix of emotions. Her cheeks warmed slightly, a blush creeping up her neck. They sat at a small table near the window, the sun streaming through the glass, casting a warm glow on their faces. Outside, the city moved in its loud, uncaring rhythm, oblivious to the quiet drama unfolding inside the bakery. Inside, it felt quieter, safer, shielded from the chaos of the world. Evelyn took a bite of the pastry, her eyes closing for half a second, savoring the sweetness. Dominic watched her, his gaze fixed on her face, as if he couldn't help himself, drawn to her like a moth to a flame. "What?" she said, opening one eye and meeting his gaze. "You do that thing," Dominic murmured, his voice soft, almost reverent. Evelyn frowned, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What thing?" "You look like you forgive the world for existing when you taste sugar." Evelyn stared at him, her expression a mixture of surprise and disbelief, then shook her head, a small, almost imperceptible movement. "That's ridiculous." Dominic's mouth curved into a gentle smile. "It's true." Evelyn sighed, but her lips twitched with amusement. "Stop staring at me." Dominic didn't look away, his gaze unwavering, locked on hers. "Make me." Evelyn's gaze locked onto his, and the air between them changed, shifting from friendly banter to something deeper, something more charged. Charged, familiar, dangerous in the sweetest way, a magnetic pull that threatened to consume them both. Dominic felt heat spread under his skin, a familiar tingle that reminded him of stolen moments and whispered promises. He knew that look in her eyes, that subtle invitation, that unspoken desire. He remembered it in bedrooms, in hallways, in quiet moments snatched between the demands of their complicated lives, in secret rendezvous where neither of them wanted to admit how much they needed the other. Evelyn's voice dropped, her tone husky with suppressed emotion. "You're playing." Dominic's eyes flicked to her mouth, drawn to the curve of her lips, the subtle hint of moisture. "I'm starving." Evelyn swallowed, her throat working visibly. She didn't move away, didn't break the intense eye contact. For a second, Dominic saw it, the possibility, the door opening wider, the potential for something more. Then Evelyn blinked, breaking the spell, and leaned back in her chair, forcing distance between them, re-establishing the boundaries she had so carefully constructed. Don't. The word was soft but firm, an unspoken command. Dominic's jaw tightened, his muscles clenching in suppressed desire. I'm not trying to rush you. Evelyn's gaze softened again, but with a hint of sadness, a wistful acknowledgement of what could never be. I don't trust myself. Dominic's voice went quiet, barely above a whisper, his gaze searching hers. Because you still want me. Evelyn didn't answer, didn't confirm or deny the truth that hung between them. She didn't have to. The silence was the answer, a resounding affirmation of the undeniable attraction that still simmered beneath the surface. Dominic's hand rested on the table, palm up, not reaching for her, just available, an open invitation, a silent offering of support. Evelyn stared at it like it was a trap, a seductive lure that threatened to drag her back into a world she had fought so hard to escape. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, she placed her fingers in his palm, her touch tentative, almost hesitant. It wasn't a romantic gesture, not in the traditional sense. It was small, simple, human, a gesture of trust and vulnerability that spoke volumes. But it hit Dominic like a vow, a silent promise that resonated deep within his soul. His fingers closed gently around hers, careful, reverent, as if she were made of something fragile and fierce, something precious and easily broken. Evelyn's voice was a whisper, barely audible above the hum of the bakery. If we do this, it has to be different. Dominic nodded, his gaze unwavering, locked on hers. It will be. Evelyn's eyes glistened with unshed tears, her voice trembling slightly. She studied his face, searching for any sign of deception. No secrets. Dominic held her gaze, his expression sincere and unwavering. No secrets. Evelyn's lips trembled slightly, her control wavering. She swallowed hard, forcing herself to speak. No disappearing. Dominic squeezed her fingers softly, his touch reassuring. Never again. Evelyn exhaled, releasing a breath she had been holding for a long time. And for the first time since they had met at the crosswalk, she looked like she could breathe, like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Then her phone buzzed, vibrating against the table. Evelyn's hand jerked slightly, almost dropping his. Her eyes flashed to the screen, her expression changing instantly, a shadow of fear passing across her face. Something cold moved through her features, hardening her eyes, tightening her jaw. Dominic noticed immediately, his senses on high alert. What is it? His voice was gentle but firm, his gaze unwavering. Evelyn's fingers tightened around the phone, her knuckles white, as if it suddenly weighed too much, a burden she could barely carry. Nothing. Dominic's voice stayed gentle, but his tone was more insistent now, his gaze unwavering. Evelyn. Evelyn's jaw set, her expression defiant. She didn't want to share, didn't want to expose her vulnerability. He could see it in the set of her shoulders, the tension in her jaw. But she had just said no secrets, had made a vow to transparency. Slowly, reluctantly, she turned the phone so Dominic could see the screen. The message wasn't from a number he recognized, wasn't in her contact list. It was from an unknown contact, a ghost in the machine. One line, stark and unsettling. You're glowing, Eve. Pregnancy looks good on you. Dominic's blood went cold, a primal instinct kicking in, a protective rage simmering beneath the surface. Evelyn's voice was tight, her words barely audible. That's why I didn't tell you. Dominic kept his face calm, his expression carefully controlled, because he knew that panic would only make her regret trusting him, would confirm her worst fears. But inside, something sharp and controlled snapped into place, a hunter awakening in the darkness. Have you gotten messages like this before? He asked quietly, his voice deceptively calm. Evelyn's eyes flicked away, avoiding his gaze. A few. Dominic's jaw tightened, his muscles clenching with barely suppressed anger. When did they start? Evelyn swallowed hard, her throat working visibly. After the divorce. Dominic's hand stayed wrapped around hers. His grip firm but gentle, a silent reassurance. But he could feel her trembling now, a subtle tremor that betrayed her inner turmoil. Not fear, exactly, but something more complex, a mixture of anger, exhaustion, and the insidious tension that comes from being watched, from knowing you are being observed, judged, and manipulated from afar. Dominic lowered his voice even more, his tone intimate and reassuring. Is it Harper? Evelyn hesitated, her silence speaking volumes. That hesitation was all he needed, confirmation of his darkest suspicions. He had known, deep down, that Harper was involved, that her obsession hadn't simply vanished after the divorce. But hearing it confirmed, seeing the fear in Evelyn's eyes, ignited a cold fury within him, a protective rage that threatened to consume him. Evelyn's eyes shone with unshed tears, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want your attention on it. Dominic's gaze softened, his heart aching for her. You thought ignoring it would make it go away? Evelyn shook her head, frustration flaring in her eyes. I thought if you didn't know, she wouldn't have leverage. Dominic's thumb stroked lightly over her knuckles, his touch gentle and reassuring. Evelyn, she already has leverage if she's watching you. Evelyn's breath shook, a barely audible tremor. I know. Dominic forced himself to stay steady, to remain calm for her sake. Did she ever threaten you directly? Evelyn's lips pressed together in a tight line, her expression conflicted. No. Dominic's eyes narrowed, his gaze intense. That's worse. Evelyn looked at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. How is that worse? Dominic's voice was low, almost a growl, his words laced with suppressed anger. Because she's trying to make you feel crazy, to erode your sense of reality. Like you're always being noticed, but never enough to prove it, to make you question your own sanity. Evelyn's eyes filled with tears, her voice cracking with emotion. It makes me feel dirty, like my life isn't mine, like I'm living in a fishbowl, exposed and vulnerable. Dominic's chest tightened painfully, a wave of empathy washing over him. He leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between them, keeping his voice soft, intimate, reassuring. Your life is yours, and our child's life is ours to protect. And I won't let anyone take that away from you. Evelyn blinked, her gaze searching his, and in that stare was something tender and terrified, a fragile hope flickering in the darkness. Dominic said carefully, choosing his words with precision. I won't break your rules, but I need you to let me do one thing. Evelyn's voice was quiet, barely audible above the hum of the bakery. What? Dominic held her gaze, his expression sincere and unwavering. Let me make sure you're safe without you seeing it, without it touching your day, without you having to carry the burden of fear. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her expression suspicious. That sounds like secrets. Dominic shook his head, his voice firm but gentle. Not secrets, boundaries. You don't need to carry the ugly parts, the darkness and the fear. You need peace, a safe haven where you can focus on yourself and our child. Evelyn hesitated, weighing his words, considering the implications. Dominic waited patiently, allowing her to process, respecting her need for control. Finally, she whispered, her voice barely audible. If you bring chaos to my door, if your efforts to protect me disrupt my life or threaten my peace of mind, I'll shut you out forever. Dominic's voice was steady, unwavering, his gaze locked on hers. I won't. Evelyn's breath released slowly, a sigh of resignation and cautious acceptance. Okay. Dominic nodded once, a small, almost reverent movement, as if he'd just been handed something sacred, a precious gift he had to protect at all costs. Evelyn's shoulders trembled slightly, betraying the emotional turmoil she was trying so hard to conceal. Dominic stood, moved around the table, and crouched beside her chair so he was lower than her, so she wouldn't feel cornered or threatened, so he could look her in the eye without towering over her. He didn't touch her immediately, respecting her boundaries, asking for permission with his eyes. Evelyn's gaze dropped to his mouth, then back to his eyes, her expression a mixture of vulnerability and longing. Then she leaned forward and pressed her forehead gently to his, a brief, intimate connection that sent a jolt of electricity through his body. Dominic closed his eyes, savoring the moment, allowing himself to feel the weight of her trust. His hands rose slowly, tentatively, to her waist, careful, respectful, as if she were made of something fragile and fierce, something precious and easily broken. Evelyn whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I hate that I still want you." Dominic's voice broke just slightly, a tremor of emotion betraying his carefully constructed facade. "Don't hate it. It was real. It is real." Evelyn swallowed, her throat working visibly. "Is it still real?" Dominic opened his eyes and met hers, his gaze unwavering, filled with a love and longing that had only grown stronger over time. More than ever. Evelyn's breath hitched, her composure wavering. "Then don't ruin it." Dominic's mouth hovered a breath away from hers, his voice husky with desire. "Tell me to stop." Evelyn didn't. She closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a tentative, exploratory kiss. It wasn't frantic, not like the desperate, impulsive kisses of their past. It wasn't messy, not like the passionate embraces that had often left them breathless and disheveled. It was slow, careful, intimate, a hesitant rediscovery of a familiar landscape. Two people relearning each other in a public place, creating a private world amidst the chaos, pretending the rest of the world didn't exist. Dominic's hand slid up to her cheek, his thumb brushing softly against her skin as if he couldn't believe he was allowed to touch her, to hold her, to taste her again. Evelyn pulled back first, her breath shaky, her eyes bright with a mixture of desire and fear. Her voice was a whisper, barely audible. "We can't. Not yet." Dominic nodded, swallowing down everything he wanted, respecting her boundaries, honoring her need for control. "Okay." Evelyn sat back, pressing a hand to her chest as if she were trying to steady her racing heart, to contain the whirlwind of emotions swirling inside her. Then her phone buzzed again, vibrating against the table, shattering the fragile peace they had created. Another message. Evelyn's face went pale, her eyes widening with a mixture of fear and resignation. Dominic didn't ask this time. He already knew. He could see the fear etched on her face, the tension in her body. Evelyn turned the screen toward him, her hand trembling slightly. "He still kisses like he owns you." Dominic's entire body went still, every muscle tensing, his senses on high alert, because that wasn't a guess, not a random act of harassment. That was confirmation that they had been watched, that someone had been observing them right now, through the bakery window, recording their every move. Evelyn's voice trembled with fury, her eyes flashing with anger and fear. "You see? That's why I didn't tell you. That's why I tried to keep you away from me." Dominic's eyes lifted slowly, scanning the street outside, his gaze calm and lethal, missing nothing. And as his gaze moved across the sidewalk, dissecting the crowd, analyzing every face, every movement, he realized the most terrifying part wasn't Harper's obsession, wasn't her relentless pursuit. It was how close she was willing to get, how brazen she had become. Because if she was bold enough to watch them kiss, to invade their privacy in such a blatant way, then the next move wouldn't be words. It would be something more direct, something more visceral, something meant to make Evelyn run again, to shatter her fragile peace and send her fleeing into the darkness. Dominic didn't react the way Evelyn expected. He didn't curse, didn't fly into a rage. He didn't storm outside, intent on confronting their tormentor. He didn't start barking orders into a phone, summoning his security team like a man about to turn the street into a scene. He simply went still, his body perfectly immobile, his expression unreadable. So still, it frightened Evelyn more than anger would have. Because Dominic Russo going quiet was never harmless. It was the calm before the storm, the prelude to a calculated act of retribution. Evelyn's fingers clenched around her phone, her knuckles white, her anxiety mounting with each passing second. "Say something." Dominic's eyes stayed on the window, scanning the sidewalk with a calm that looked almost casual to anyone watching. A deceptive facade that concealed the dangerous calculations running through his mind. "Finish your tea," he said, his voice low and steady. Evelyn blinked, momentarily stunned by his apparent nonchalance. "What? Finish your tea?" Dominic repeated, his voice low and insistent. "Breathe. Don't look around like prey." Evelyn's throat tightened, her heart pounding in her chest. "I am not prey. I know," Dominic said, finally turning his gaze back to her. His eyes were warm, steady, reassuring. "But whoever sent that wants you to feel like you are." Evelyn's breath shook, her control wavering. "She watched us." Dominic reached across the table and took her hand again, his touch slow, deliberate, a conscious act of reassurance. "She wants a reaction. She wants fear. She wants you to run. E.D. on Titam. Audiobook D. Mot ku, haiku. Foi qua Evelyn bong rat nu the ko vua ni no cia tiang dong ho. Koi kung, ko ti tau. Saw ko ta ko the tau bao den vei? On mat Dominic van hung v phia truok. VM de omot min. Bong Evelyn quan that. They de la loi qua toi. Dominic dung lai nai lap tuc va quay mat doi dien voi ko. Doi mat sakben. Kong. Dong nuoi vei quan ho. And hung su tap trung qua Dominic Thursday hep lai veo quan mat ko. De kong phi la loi qua em. On noi, kim sot va aro wrong. Em ko huan kong? Evelyn chop mat. That ngo truok suman leet. Jong Dominic dio lai. Kota dang chan exam chiam kuok song quarem. Du la vik qua kota. Em de lam and hung gi em phi lam de song sot. Doi mat Evelyn sang len. Em kong muon loi on veo chuyen nai. Gon tate sai qua Dominic lut qua te ko. Em kong loi on veo. On thwak v noi nai. Evelyn nut con. On kong thwak v noi nai kai em ka exian. And hung loi noi tut ra truok kai ko the non chung lai. Dominic kong he now nung. On nam mat lai trong motga nu the on sung dang voi kudan. Sao du. On mo mat ra va noi no ne. On beat. Su thuan and don john, du de quap di kong kai trong long nguk ko. Kong fong Thursday kong a pravdanya, kong dien van, chi la on beat. O teep tuc buk di. Dominic dan ko den exi quan. Kong phi cheek sedan mao den nu truok. Ma la mot cheek SUV mao xam ben thuang trong jong nu bat ky cheek xe now kok tren duong. Evelyn dung lai. De la quaron? Dominic mo qua gihan kok. Ham ne ti la ve. Evelyn neo mat. On so hu mot cheek xe ben thuang. Coming Dominic jayat. Dung noi voi ai ne. Say lam hong dan tiang quan du. Bat chap moi Thursday. Evelyn bat ra mot tiang koi non. No lam nut vo noi so hi mot chut. Ko buk veo. Dominic dong quan ain hang. Sao du di vong quan van goi sao te lai. On kong fong di. On kong tang tok. On lai xe nu mot nuoi den ong dua mot nuoi qui gia v na. Evelyn nin cham ra nguai kwaso. Ham engian chat. Ko beat chung tadahan now. Dominic gat dao mot tsai. You. Jong Evelyn run ray v John du chu kong phi v so high. That kin tom. Bon te Dominic seat chat vo lang. Du la mot nuok di. Evelyn nin on. On din lam gi? Dominic leak nin ko ben tin. On esi ju loi hua voyem. Doi mat Evelyn neo lai. Du kong phi la ka tra loi. Hem Dominic ko jayat. Du la ka tra loi du wei not ko wainia. Evelyn nin on day that vong. Dominic. On cat loi ko nain hang. On esi kong gay chien. On esi kong mang su han lon den quan rm. On esi kong kinem hoi han v de cho on quay lai. Jong Evelyn dio lai. Gon nu van exi. Vei ti saw. Dominic tho ra tu. Vei ti on esi su ly no mot catch lang lu. Doi mat Evelyn lo len. Lang lu ne ko v be mat. Dominic leak nin kolon nua. Kong. Lang lu ne ko v nuem gugon jiak veo bandem. Evelyn im lang v ko muon ju du han la kim sot. Ho den toa na qua ko. Dominic dao xe han mot chut. Kong nai phia truok. Nu the de tran bien loi veo qua kotan mot diem nan. Te Evelyn lo lung tren te nam qua. Ko ven chua di chuyen. Dominic cho doi. Koi kung. Ko ti tam. Nu koda siu teep tuc lam du nai ti saw? Jong Dominic kien din. Vei ti on siu o de thoi. Evelyn nin on. Doi mat long lan. On noi ju du nu the no don John lam. On mat Dominic dio lai. Voi em. No lave. Ko hong Evelyn engen lai. Dung lai. Long my Dominic nu on len. Dung lai tsai gi? Dung lai vik noi and hung du kina muon on saw? Ko noi jong lak di. Long nguk Dominic that lai. On kong koi. On kong tru chok. On chi noi. Vei ti siu muon on di. Evelyn nin cham cham on tho nong. Bonte Dominic tu nong len. Ven chua cham veo ko. On ko the kong. Doi mat Evelyn hasuang moi on. Saudu ko get dao barely. Dominic enging nuoi vahan kolon nua. Mem my cham rai, ken then. Bonte on om le ma ko. Gonte tsilut ne. Nuthron dang ghi no kuon mat ko mot lon nua. Evelyn han on dap lai. Ko fan tuet vong han lon nai. Vi ko get vik noi so high to quap di quan you Thursday qua ko. Ko ta muon mot Thursday gi du thwak vi ko I. Dominic rut Louis truok. Tho doc. Doi mat toi sam lai vi kim che. On kong the lam du nai nu avoy. On lam bam. Jong Evelyn la mot tiang ti tam. M kung vei. On mat Dominic lia suong bung ko. Roy tro lai mat ko. Kong phi trong xe. Evelyn nin tho. Dominic. On kong tuki p. On lam ko vung long. Noi cho on beat m muon gi. Evelyn nut con. Te ko run len nain hang. M muon cam thay ben thuong tro lai. Jong Dominic dio lai. Bei ti heda on mang lai cho em su ben thuong. Evelyn nin on nu the ko kong the tin rang on ko the noi du va ko y du. Koi kung. Ko ti tam. Hey len na chi hum ne thoi. Tone then Dominic bat dong. Doi mat Evelyn neo lai. Nu on lam qua len. Mse doi y. Dominic nut con. Gat dao emotitsai. Kong lam qua. Ho kung now di len. Evelyn mo qua. Buk veo truok. Sao du bat den. Can ho don John. Map. Ko nu oyo. Cheek chan mem my trendavan. Mot chong sach tren bon sa fi. Mot tsai ke no ben qua so trong nu dang chien dao de jian le su song. Dominic leak nin no. Ke du ko on kong. Evelyn dong qua lai va du a lung veo no. No hey lam tiaro. No muon duok chu y. Koming Dominic jiat. They no liem. Evelyn koi kai. Sao dun and mat ne kai ko thay doi to the. V mat Dominic thay doi nai lap tuc. Ko dao kong. Evelyn dao mat. Kong. Chi la tuc bung thoi. Dominic tien lai gon han. Ken then. Ngoi suong di. Evelyn nuon mai. On kong phi bacsi quarem. On mat Dominic ju chat ko. Kong on la nuoi cha si hong lon nu m gia vio on kai m kong on. Evelyn du. Sao du tho dai va dv phi a cheek the von. Ngoi suong mot catch nain hang. Dominic qui suong truok mat ko. Doi mat ngang tam voi bung ko. On van chua cham veo no. On angwak nin ko. On ko the kong. Kuon mat Evelyn dio lai. You. Bonte Dominic dat ne len bung ko. Suem ap tran gap on. Tinu so high kin gak. Tat ca kung mot luke. Evelyn theo doi on sat saw. On dang sui gi quan yu. Dominic bat ra mot tiang koi no. On dang ko kong lam vei. Evelyn vuon te va luon and hung gon te qua talk on. Mot siu chi then mat no keen ko hong Dominic that lie. On luon lam du nai. Ko ti tam. Lam gi. Siu koi kem suk lar motiv and ma on ko the jai quiet. Dominic engwak nin ko. Doi mat toi sam. Ti no la ve ma. Nu koi qua Evelyn diodong va buon ba. Kong Dominic. No kong phi lar motiv enda. No la van de then shot. And hung loi noi lang dong jua ho. Dominic dung day tu. Ngoi suong ben kan ko. Koang catch jua ko the ho rat mong man. Chongman den. Jong Evelyn no han. Tung ngoi tren cheek the van nai va tu nu. Kong no on. On mat Dominic don chat veo moi ko. Va. Evelyn nut con. De noi doi. Bon te Dominic truit den eo ko. and hung gon te nain hang. Evelyn. Ko kwe mat doi dien voi on hon ton. Doi mat ko sang and hung geo da on din. De hem muon ma ko kong he che jiao. Chi kanoam em thoi ko anoi. Kong sua chua. Kong kahoch. Chi kanoam em thoi. Dominic kio ko veo vong teon. Ken then voi bung ko. Om ko nu the kolar mot Thursday gi du thieng liang. Evelyn tan che veo on. Valon dao tien sao nu thang. Vi ko hon ton the long. Ho siu nu vei trong mot koen kok dai. Kung now hit though. Sao du. Evelyn huck nich engwak mat len. Dominic han kolon nua. Sao han bai geo. Van dio dong. And hung cow kot theo mot kitchkin to Evelyn len. Bon te on truit doc theo lung ko. Cham rai. Tun trong. King ko tho dai veo moron. Kak gon te qua Evelyn quan veo ao on. On van ko mui nu vei. Ko ti tam. Jong Dominic tho rap. M kung vei. Evelyn kio lai vua du de nin on. Hua voi m du gi du. Bat siu du gi. Nu Harper ko gang kio on tro lai ton nuoi dinong du. Ko noi mot catch kanan. Dung de ko ta lam vei. Hem Dominic song lai. On esi kong. Doi mat Evelyn du zed on. On the chu. Dominic ju chat on mat ko. On the VM, v du a b. V moi Thursday chu? Evelyn get dao cham rai nu the ko confine in thay du tren q on mat on. Sao du, ko enging nuoi lai. Han on voi su tu tin han bai geo. Cho fep nu han. Dominic dap lai nai lap tuc. Nain hang nong ko len de kon goi tren dui on ma kong de nong len bung ko. Evelyn ki tho han hen. Kak gon te bam chat veo vi on. Moi Dominic di chuyen den hem ko. Sao du den ko. Hano du tu. King ko nam mat lai. Cam jiak vua map vua quen thwak va mwami kung mot luke. Evelyn ti tam. Chung ta kong nin. Dominic dung lai nai lap tuc. Doi mat chop v fia ko. Noi dung lai va on se dung lai. Evelyn nin cham kong tho. Sao du ko lak dao. M kong muon dung lai. M chi. M so muon on u den vei. Jong Dominic tram va on din. Vei tcu de no dang so di. On ode. Doi mat Evelyn lai non lu. Kohan on man han nu the kodang chan on bat chap noi so high. Dominic dung len. Can the nong ko len va bi ko vi fia fong gu. Evelyn nin tho. Dominic. On nin ko. Noi cho on beat nu m ko chiu. M kong ko chiu. Ko ti tam. Koi kung tm kung kem thay thoi mai. On dat ko suong nain hang. Lo lung tren ko nu mot nuoi den ong kong the tin rang min duok fep. On han kolon nua. Cham rai vatan kin. Bon te vut vi hai ben hong ko. Vi ko. Duong tsong io ko. Goi kam in hung kin then. Kong bao geo tho bao. Kong bao geo voi vang. Kak gon te qua Evelyn luon veo talk on. M no on. Ko Thursday nin veo moron. Jong Dominic engen geo. On no m nu kong kai. Hodi chuyen kung now cham rai. Hok lai vi now voi and hung tsai cham nain hang va and hung im ton em dio. Kio than mat kong can loi noi de tro nin man leet. Dominic keen ko can thay duok kao kot. Kong fi nu mot ao mong. Kong fi nu mot jai thwang. Ma nu mot nuoi fu nu on u va kao kot bang ca ko the. Sao kai ho nam zone sut trong ga tre juong. Dominic vong te om ko. Dao Evelyn tua veon gukon. Trong vi foot. Moi Thursday kam thay yen ben. Ben thwang. Sao du. Dien thoi qua Evelyn rung len tu dao juong. Ko the Evelyn kung du nai lap tuc. Dominic cam nen duok du va seat chat vong te qua on. Dung. On lam bam. Kong fi toi ne. Evelyn nut con. Nin cham veo mon hin sang. Dominic voi te lat up dien thoi suong ma kong kin nin. Toi ne la qua chung ta. Hoi tho qua Evelyn run ray. Nu no quan trong ti saw. Jong Dominic tram tin. Chuk chan. Nu no quan trong noven esi quan trong veo bui sang. Evelyn du. Sao du gat dao. De ban than chim lai veo on. Ho nam du tho. Ko gang tin rang mon dem ko the bao vi ho. Vi foot sao mot tieng rung kok. Roy mot tieng kok. Long guk Evelyn that lai. Kon goi de ne. Kong the fat lo no nua. Dominic kung goi de. Ham engian chat. Evelyn. M phis m. Ko ti tam. Mat mo to vi so high. Dominic gat dao mo titsai. Duok roy md. And hung kong don doc. Evelyn cam dien thoi len voi doi te run ray. Va zoi mon hin vi fia on. Du kong fi la mot tin nan. Du la mot email. Mot tep din kem duwe not. Var mot dong chu de keen mao Evelyn dong kung lai. Dan cho dua b. Evelyn nin cham veo no, nin tho. Huan mat Dominic tro nin bat dong. Kim sot. Evelyn t tam. Dung mo no ra mat Dominic kong roy koi mon hin. De beat no la gi roy ma. Jong Evelyn lak di. Du la bang chung. Ko ta muon bang chung rang ko ta ogon. Dominic nain hang lay dien thoi koi te ko. Vei ti chung ta kong cho ko ta su hai long kai nin them subdu. Mat Evelyn non lu. Su hong lon dang treo. Dominic nu. Mot kondao noi kat gang ka noi kwa ko. Evelyn tho han hen va om lay bung dui. Tone then Dominic tap trung nai lap tuc. Evelyn. Ko hit mot hoi. Mat mo2. No dao. Dominic truit koi juong nai lap tuc. Ken then va and han chong. O dao? Noi cho on beat o dao. Te Evelyn run ray tren bung ko. Dui thap. Jong nu ap Luke. Jong Dominic van Bentin. And hung doi mat on du doi. Duok roy hit tho di. On o day. Evelyn ko gang hit veo. And hung mot dot kok ap den. Va ko ka len ki. Nam chat kanteon. Dominic tai met. Evelyn. Ko by ko that kong? Evelyn lak dao dien kwang. Kan kwa som. Dominic chop lay dien thoi kwa on. Bon te vung vang bat chap noi so hai trong mat on. On dang goi. Evelyn nam lay ko te on. Kong ko koi bao dong Dominic. On mat Dominic qua chat veo ko. Jong tram va tuet doi. Kong ko koi bao dong. Chi kan jup du thoi. Hoi tho qua Evelyn run len. Dominic. On vut talk ko ra sao. Jodong han bat kyai ko the tin duok. Olai voyon. Nin on nai. Dominic li xe nu mot nuoi din ong dang om tui tin. Kong in han, Kong lu lin, chi kim sot. Mwapa varoto mi, mwa diem dung nain hang. Mat on lin tuc dao kwa li jua kan duong va Evelyn quan tron tren gi han kok. Mot te nam chat te nam kwa. Te kia and veo bung ko. Hit tho di ev. On lam bam jong kien din. Nin on nai. Evelyn ko gang. Doi mat ko yut dam. Mo to vi so high. Kan kwa sam ko ti tam. Hem Dominic song lai. Chung ta kong quiet din judu. Kak bacsi quiet din. Mot dot kok ap den. Evelyn tho han hen va quan nuoi vi fia truok. Tim Dominic that lie. Duok roy. Hit veo bang mui tho ra bang ming. Siu nu vei. Evelyn lak dao. Nuok mat treo ra chuyen nai zay ra la vi kota. Jong Dominic tro nin tram thap. Chip chan. Kong fi toi ne la vm va dua b. Ho tap veo loi veo ben vin. Dominic dao xeo cho gon not ko the tim thay. Nem xe veo so pi. Vada o qua xe qua ko trong vi ga. On can then be ko len. Fat lo and hung on nin tu nuoi qua duong. Mot y ta lao vi fia ho voi mot cheek exilon. Ben nan mang tai? Ko hoi. Vang. Dominic noi. Dao tuc bung. Ko the la ko that. Kak gon te qua Evelyn kep chat lay te ao qua Dominic. Kong amai. Ko ti tam qua hem rang engian chat. Then ko gang kim sot the gioi. Dominic cui suong gon jong diodong. Kong amai. Chi kan jup du thoi. Ho di trien in han chong qua and hung han lang sang sua. Ji tu ka hoi. Mo cheek vong te duok gon veo ko te qua Evelyn. Dominic oben kan ko. Tra loi and hung gi on ko the. De Evelyn noi kai ko suc Luke. Trong ku fan loi. Mot mon hin duok gon quan bung ko. Nip dap on din lap day kan fong mot lon nua. Man me, kien quiet. Evelyn nuke no trong sune nam. Kan on. Waita mim koi. Nip tim ko vi tot. Dominic tho ra nu the on vuachet dui. Mot bacsi buk veo. Ben tin tap trung. Hey zem chun gi dang zay ra vi foot kem thay nu hung gio. Evelyn seat chat te Dominic cho den kai kak. Gon te qua on trang bek. Koi kung. v mat qua bacsi dio lai. Ko kong chuyen de, ko noi. And hung gi ko dang kam thay ko kanong lot song tang. Mat nuok va kichung tu kung. No ko the gay dao don. And hung no kong phi la chuyen de tich cuc. By Evelyn Trung Suong v na nam. Dominic nam mat lai trong ga lat. Ve la kanon. Kanon bacsi zak nan. And hung ko kan gin goi va jiam song tang. Evelyn bat ra mot tiang koi, run ray, nay knew that by. Jiam song tang. Ko lap lai. Chuk chan roy. Bak si leak ninjua ho. Saudu ha thap jong. Nu ko ju gi du hok ai du king ko kan thay kong and tone. Konan noi voi chung tua. Chung tua ko the jup ko ket noi voi su ho tiaro. Doi mat Evelyn leak nin Dominic. Saudu nin di. Tuaron. Dominic kong tran kai truok mat bacsi. On chi seat chat te ko vung vang, hien dien. Sao kai bacsi roy di. Evelyn nam suong. Kiet suc. On den huin quang keen ko trong not han ben thuong. Dominic lut gonte tsai qua on qua kak gonte ko. De la loi quarem. Ko ti tam. Long nguk Dominic that lie. Kong. Doi mat Evelyn long lan. M de cho on veo va bai geo moi Thursday du. Dominic enging nuoi. Jong tram va kong le chuyen. Evelyn nay on nai. M kong fa vio bet siu ju gi. M kong moi kota. M kong gay ra chuyen nai. Evelyn nut con. Ve tai saw m kem thay nu min luon di sao mot byuk. On mat Dominic ju chat ko, vm do mot min. Moi Evelyn run len. M kong muon on by loi veo chuyen nai. V mat Dominic dio lai. On kong by loi veo. On dang chan m. Nuok mat lon dai tren my Evelyn. Im lang va nong hoi. Dominic nain hang bat chung bang gon tate sai quan. M so, ko thuanan. M so on esique tero lai ton nuoi denong du. Dominic kong chop mat. On esi kong. Evelyn du zet q on mat on. Tuet vong tim kim suchik chan. Lam saw on ko the hua ju du. Dominic tho ra tu. V on no and hung gi on defy tra gia lon dao tien on chan long kio han m. Hoi tho qua Evelyn on din lai mot chut. Mat Dominic ha suong bung ko. Saudu tro lai ko. On esi lam du nai dung catch. Long mai Evelyn dan veo now. Du ko nia la gi? Jong Dominic no nay. Du ko nia la ge my chung ta si nop don xian, len bao vi nu chung ta kan. Du ko nia la chung ta ghi lai moi Thursday. Du ko nia la chung ta kong choi tro choi. Va du ko nia la m kong gan chu no mot min. Evelyn rut nuoi lai. Ne ko vi nu day. Dominic gat dao. On esi gan and hung fan nong nok. M gan du a b. Du la tho a thwan. Mo tiang koi no thot ra koi Evelyn. Run ray and hung that. On hong hatch that. Coming Dominic tsong len. Du saw tm kung de koi on. Nu koi qua Evelyn phi not tan su dong. Varem de bo on. Dominic gat dao emotitsai. Va on sung dang voi judu. Su im lang kio dai. Sao du. Evelyn titam. M kong muon get on nua. Ko hong Dominic that lie. Vei ti dung get. Evelyn nin on cham trong mot koan kok dai. Sao du vuon te va om le maron. Siu chi qua ko map. Vung chuk. M van yuan. Ko noi no ne. Nu the Thursday nen mot ju gi du noihim. Dominic enging nuoi veo long bon te ko. On chua bao geo and gung um. Doi mat Evelyn lai non lu. And hung lon nai hung jiat nuok mat trong jong nu sune nam. Vi geo sao ho duok zut veen voi and hung hung dan. Ging goi, bu nuok, theo doi. Dominic dan ko ra nagwai. Mot te lo lung sao lung ko. Kong day, kong kim sot, chi san song. Tro lai can ho qua ko. Dominic fatra. Sao du dung bat luke trong can be pino. Evelyn quan sat on. On kong beat phi lam gi trong mot can be p ben thuong. Dominic leak nin em dun nuok. On dang hok. Coming Evelyn jiat. Ngoi di. On ngoi suong. Evelyn ha min suong chik devan. Voi mot tieng tho dai. Dominic do a cho ko tach tranu the no lar mot Thursday quigia. Ko nap motingum. Saudun in cham veo dien tho I tren bon. Mat Songtang. On Mat Dominic Sakbin. Chung Ta Si Kong Emotep Din Kemdu. Evelyn Nutkon. And Hung Nu No Koju Gi Du Quan Trong Tisaw. Jong Dominic Ben Tin. Nu No Quan Trong No Ko the Duak Gue Lai Kwai Moti Lutsu. Evelyn Ninon Sao Du Gat Dao Cham Rai. Dominic Tho Te Veo Au Koak Va Kio Ra Mot Thursday Muc No. Evelyn Chop Mat. Du La Gi Ve. Dominic Hit Mot Hoi. Su That. Loi Ma on Lu Ra Phi Cho M Tu Lao Roy. Doi Mat Evelyn Neo Lai. Dominic. On Mo Thursday Muc Ra Va Truit Mot Tai Lu Len Bon. Evelyn Nin Cham Cham Veo No. Jong Dominic Kien Din and Hung Tho Rap. Truak Kai, Ly Han Duak Hon Tat. On de Dat Mot Thursday Veo 6 Tri. Mot Qui Ui Thok Dui 10 Kong Phi de Kimsot, Malada Bao V. Nu Kobet Cu Ju Gi Zara Voi on Hok Nu the Gioi Kwa on Ko Gang Cham Veo M. Mvadua B Se Duak Bao V. Kong Rong Byuk. Evelyn Nin Tho. On de Lam Ju Du Saw. Dominic Gat Dao. On de Kong Noi Voi MVMSE Gi Du La Su Tao Tung. Doi Mat Evelyn Nong Bung. On Luare Nin Noi Voi M. Beat. Dominic Noi No Ne. Du La Ly Du Tai Saw on Noi Voi M Bai Gio. Evelyn Nin Suong Bung Min. Te Dato Du. Kai Konin Len, Jong Ko Run Ray. Tai Saw. Dominic? Doi Mat Dominic Ju Chat Ko. V Nai Ca Kai on Dang Mat M. On Kung Kong the Chiu Duok, Ygiam Kong Duok Bao Ve. Evelyn Nut Kon Va Harper. Hem Dominic Tsong Lai. Harper Gi Ko Ta Ko the Kim Sot on Bang Catch Kim Sok Gwin Teep Convoy M. Ko Ta Kong the. Doi Mat Evelyn Du Zet Q on Mat On Ko Chik Kong. Dominic Enging Nu Oi V Phia Truok. Jong Tram Va Than Mat. On Chuk Chan V on De Song Zong Motkuok Doi. Noi Tinu La Thursday on Trihon. Moi Evelyn Ha Mo. Ko Trong Chong Gap. Roy Tuc John. Roy Diodong. On that La Kong the. Ko Ti Tam. Koming Dominic Tsong Len. M de Noi Du Du Roy. Evelyn Koi Kwa Nuok Mat. Sao Du. Ko Vuan Te Nam Le Te on Va Ju Chat. O Lai, Ko Noi. Mo Tu. Kong Kio Han Kong Ao Jayap. Long Nguk Dominic That Lai. Evelyn O Lai. Ko Lap Lai Chuk Chan Han. Kong Chi Toi Ne. O Lai Voi M That Su. Dominic Nutkan Doi Mat Sang Len. You? Vi Evelyn the Long Nu the Koda Ju Min Dung Vung Trong Nu Thang Ma Kong Nin Ra Du Du. Ko Enging Nuoi Veo on, Dao Tua Veo Vion. Dominic Vong Te Om Ko. Ken Then Va Map. Ben Nguai. Tan Fo Van Teep Tuc Di Chuyen. Ben Trong, Lon Dao Tien Sawamoti Thoi John Dai. Evelyn Kem Thay Ju Gi Du Ma Kogi Min De Dan Mat Mai. Antone. Va Kai Dua Bi Kwa Min Dui Longban Te Ko. Dominic Cui Davahan Len Tai Jun Ko. Jong Chi Vua Du Nathe. Chung Ta Si Lai Moti Jia Din. On Noi. Evelyn Nam Mat Lai Hit Tho on. Dominic murmured. His voice a low rumble. Walk. And so they walked. Evelyn's lungs burned with a ferocity that made it feel as if she'd been deprived of air for an eternity. Each breath was a struggle, a painful reminder of her physical limitations in this moment of heightened tension. Finally, she managed a strained whisper, the words barely audible. How can she be this bold? Dominic's gaze remained fixed straight ahead, his expression unreadable. The intensity in his eyes hinted at a storm brewing beneath the surface. Because you've been alone, he stated simply, the weight of his words settling heavily in the air. A sharp twist of nausea churned in Evelyn's stomach, a physical manifestation of the guilt and self-reproach that threatened to consume her. So it's my fault. The thought echoed in her mind, a cruel accusation that she couldn't escape. Dominic halted abruptly, pivoting to face her with a suddenness that made her jump. His eyes, previously distant and focused, were now sharp and intensely scrutinizing her face. The world around them faded into a blur of motion as people flowed past, their voices a muted hum in the background. Dominic's focus narrowed, locking onto her with an unwavering intensity. It's not your fault, he declared, his voice controlled and clear, each word carefully measured. Do you understand me? Evelyn blinked, caught off guard by the sheer force of his conviction. His words were like a lifeline, a desperate attempt to pull her back from the edge of despair. Dominic's voice softened, the harsh edges replaced with a gentle understanding. She is choosing to invade your life. That's on her. You did what you had to do to survive. Evelyn's eyes shone with a mixture of gratitude and lingering pain. Tears threatened to spill over, blurring her vision. I didn't want to drag you into it. The unspoken words hung between them, a silent plea for forgiveness. Dominic's thumb gently brushed against the back of her hand, a fleeting touch that conveyed a depth of emotion. You didn't drag me. I belong here. Evelyn swallowed hard, the lump in her throat making it difficult to speak. You didn't belong here when I begged. The words slipped out before she could stop them, a raw and unfiltered expression of her past hurt and resentment. Dominic didn't flinch, his expression unwavering. He closed his eyes for a fleeting second, as if bracing himself for a blow he knew he deserved. Then he opened them, his gaze steady and filled with a quiet sorrow. I know. That simple admission stole the air from her chest, leaving her breathless. No defense, no excuses, no grand speeches, just a simple I know. The honesty in his words was disarming, cutting through her anger and resentment like a knife. They resumed walking, the silence between them now filled with a newfound understanding and unspoken forgiveness. Dominic gently guided her towards his car, not the sleek black sedan from before, but a plain gray SUV that blended seamlessly with the other vehicles on the street. It was a car that spoke of practicality and discretion, a far cry from the ostentatious displays of wealth that she associated with his world. Evelyn paused, her eyes narrowed in surprise. This is yours? Dominic reached out and opened the passenger door, a faint smile playing on his lips. Today it is. Evelyn's suspicion deepened, her gaze searching his face for answers. You own a normal car. The words hung in the air, a silent accusation. Dominic's mouth twitched, a hint of amusement flickering in his eyes. Don't tell anyone. It'll ruin my reputation. Despite everything, Evelyn couldn't help but let out a short, involuntary laugh. The sound, though small, cracked the surface of her fear, allowing a sliver of light to penetrate the darkness. She got in, settling into the surprisingly comfortable seat. Dominic closed the door gently, a gesture of care and consideration that warmed her heart. Then he walked around and slid behind the wheel. He didn't peel out, didn't speed, didn't engage in any of the reckless behavior she expected. He drove like a man taking someone precious home, his focus solely on her safety and well-being. Evelyn stared out the window, her jaw tight with barely suppressed emotion. The passing scenery was a blur, her mind racing with unanswered questions and unresolved feelings. She knew we kissed. Dominic nodded once, his voice quiet and resigned. Yes, Evelyn's voice trembled, now fueled by a white-hot rage rather than fear. The betrayal cut deep, reopening old wounds and stirring up a resentment she thought she'd buried. That's disgusting. Dominic's hands tightened on the steering wheel, his knuckles turning white with the force of his grip. He remained silent for a moment, struggling to contain his own anger and frustration. It is a beat. Evelyn turned to face him, her eyes blazing with a mixture of hurt and defiance. What are you going to do? Dominic glanced at her, his expression calm and resolute. I'm going to keep my promises to you. Evelyn's eyes narrowed, her suspicion unwavering. That's not an answer. She needed more. A concrete plan of action that would guarantee her safety and put an end to Harper's torment. Dominic's jaw flexed, the muscle twitching with barely controlled tension. It's the only answer that matters. Evelyn stared at him, frustration building with each passing moment. Dominic, he cut her off gently, his voice soft but firm. I'm not going to start a war. I'm not going to bring chaos to your door. I'm not going to make you regret letting me back in. Evelyn's voice softened, almost pleading. Then what? Dominic exhaled slowly, his gaze fixed on the road ahead. Then I'll handle it quietly. Evelyn's eyes flashed with skepticism. Quietly sounds like secrets. The thought of him operating in the shadows, resorting to his old methods, filled her with dread. Dominic glanced at her again, his eyes filled with a mixture of reassurance and determination. "No, quietly sounds like you sleeping at night." Evelyn fell silent, the image of peaceful slumber a powerful lure. She wanted that more than she wanted control, more than she wanted revenge. She wanted to escape the constant fear that had consumed her life, to find a moment of respite in Dominic's protection. They reached her building, the familiar sight offering a small measure of comfort. Dominic parked a little farther down the street, not directly in front, as if deliberately avoiding turning her entrance into a public spectacle. Evelyn's hand hovered over the door handle, but she hesitated, unable to bring herself to leave the relative safety of the car. She didn't move, her mind wrestling with doubt and uncertainty. Dominic waited patiently, sensing her inner turmoil. She finally whispered, the words barely audible. "What if she keeps doing this?" Dominic's voice was steady, unwavering in its conviction. "Then I keep being here." Evelyn looked at him, her eyes glossy with unshed tears. "You say that like it's simple." Dominic's gaze softened, a hint of tenderness creeping into his expression. "With you it is." Evelyn's throat moved with a visible swallow, the effort to contain her emotions evident. "Stop." Dominic's brow lifted in question. "Stop what?" "Stop saying things that make me want you," she said, her voice breaking, the vulnerability in her tone shattering his composure. Dominic's chest tightened, his heart pounding in his ears. He didn't smile, didn't tease, didn't try to deflect the intensity of the moment. He just said, his voice low and husky, "Then want me?" Evelyn stared at him, her breathing shallow and erratic. The air between them crackled with unspoken desire, a magnetic pull that threatened to consume them both. Dominic's hand lifted slowly, deliberately, not touching her yet, allowing her to dictate the pace. "May I?" Evelyn's eyes dropped to his mouth. "Don't ever leave again." Dominic's voice was a low, fervent plea as he tightened his hold on her, drawing her closer until she was flush against him. "Never. Promise me, Evelyn. Never." Her phone, a persistent intrusion in their fragile bubble, buzzed once, a final, desperate signal from the outside world clamoring for her attention. Dominic resolutely didn't look, his gaze fixed on Evelyn, willing her to stay present, to choose him. Evelyn didn't flinch, didn't even glance down. With a deliberate, decisive movement, she turned the device face down on the table, silencing its insistent call. The gesture was small, but it spoke volumes. Then, she reached for his hand, her fingers interlacing with his, a silent vow. She was choosing peace, choosing him, choosing their shared sanctuary over the chaos and demands that waited beyond. In that moment, nestled in his embrace, the world outside faded away, replaced by the quiet certainty of belonging.